Of the Brickyard podcast. We are coming to you live on a St. Patrick's Day Eve from the great city of Austin, Texas, and Phoenix, Arizona. I'm your co host, MC. I'm here with Brick, and we're going to be going over the latest free agency signings. This will be week 2 of NFL free agency, wrapping that up, going over if there are any remaining free agents or moves to be made, kind of how these changes these teams' outlooks on the draft. Also doing our AFC and NFC West preview as far as the offseason heading into next year. Also going to be going over some of the records broken in the NBA, but it's been a whirlwind here. We went from 96 degrees yesterday to a low of 33 degrees tonight. So it
Jesus
was
Christ.
96, chilling by the pool yesterday, and then we had 50-mile-per-hour winds, and then that cooled everything off. And now I woke up this morning, it was 44 degrees. I'm like, what is happening right now?
That's cursed. Can you bring some of that cold air here? Because since last week, it's been consistently over 90 with a low of 75 for the last week in Phoenix. And everybody knows how hot it is in this fucking city. Next week, it's going to be 100, 103, 106, 105, and a 101 consecutively. It's going to be the most 100-degree days in the month of March ever. It's going to be the hottest in March ever on record. And then it's going to be the first 105-degree day by 2 months. The earliest before then was like April 29th, and we're going to get it a month early, 105. So we get the great heat of 2 months earlier, just like everybody asked.
Yeah, and it's a record set. And did you notice in the winter in Phoenix, do y'all's homeless people like kind of thaw out from like their brain being melted? I know there's a lot of the fentanyl in Phoenix, but when I was there, caught it at the tail end of the summer. It was like the second week of September, so it's still pretty hot, and it seemed like all of the heat from the summer was still kind of just sitting there because Phoenix is a bowl. But I was like, these are the most probably like docile homeless people I've ever seen because it's so hot there. They're all just kind of passed out doing the fentanyl. So do they like kind of reverse thaw out from the summer?
Yeah, I would say so. Like wintertime is when they're the most coherent. When you are there in the summertime and it's 115 every day for 2 months straight, those people they couldn't even commit a crime if they wanted to because they're so dehydrated. The sun has just been beating on them for the last 2 months. By the end of the summer, half of these guys are just melting on the pavement, genuinely.
Yeah, it's like one of those cities you need a gallon of water for your car in case it overheats and a gallon of water for yourself in case your car breaks down and you get stuck there. But it's like if you're committing crimes and you're dehydrated, like honestly, you just have to give them a slow clap because that is impressive if you're out here when it's 115 degrees committing a heist.
Yeah, it's just like it's not for the weak, to be honest. This city, with how hot it gets and how consistently hot it is, you got to have some thick skin to live in the city, or better yet, to commit crime in the city.
Yeah, so Phoenix definitely a tough place to commit crime. Baltimore also another good city to commit crime and fraud. For the Baltimore Ravens, we had the Max Crosby trade go through. Everyone talked about how excited they were for Baltimore potentially being contenders with Max Crosby on their defense. And then Baltimore looked up and they had 7 starters walking out the door in free agency. Had players like Stout, Zale Likely, Linderbaum, all out the door. And then they also saw there's not really a market for Trey Hendrickson right now. And then they hadn't done their physical yet, so they decided, you know what? We need those first 2 first round picks that we sent over for Max Crosby. And then they said, medical issue, we're canceling the trade. Do you think that's accurate, or do you think this is actually a medical issue?
I don't think it's a medical issue. I genuinely think they talked to Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendricks said, I'm going to join your team. We're going to go, actually, we don't want to make this Max Crosby deal. He is recovering from an injury. So they used that as a reason to cancel the trade. And if I'm the Ravens, like, you get a guy who's maybe 85% of Max Crosby, I take that. And you don't have to give up any picks for him. You're going to pay him the same amount of money anyways. You're going to have to sign him to a deal. So, like, honestly, it's kind of smart on the Ravens' part to cancel the trade. I do think Max Crosby is a better player than Trey Hendrickson, but we are talking about two of the top 5 or 6 edge rushers in the league. So 100% the Ravens canceled this trade because they knew they were getting Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, and it was one of those moves where you go out there and trade for Max Crosby. And it's like, I don't actually know if this makes the Ravens a Super Bowl team because I've seen the Ravens with Mike McDonald, who just coached the Seattle Seahawks to a Super Bowl, and he still had an elite defense that year. They were at home, and the Kansas City Chiefs really couldn't move the ball. They didn't score in the fourth quarter against the Baltimore Ravens, and they still had a legit offense around Lamar Jackson that year. Believe it was an MVP season because they were the #1 overall seed, had home field advantage, and Lamar couldn't even do it with that team. So I'm like, I don't necessarily think that this makes them a contender. And then when you see someone like Trey Hendrickson, who's just still out there and can give you similar production as Max Crosby, and you have a legitimate excuse because he had the MCL surgery, you're like, oh wow, this really does suck. I guess we can't go through because it's a medical. And then the GM came out in the most phony statement I've ever seen. He's like, I am sick that this trade couldn't go through and I have to keep my first round picks. And then you look at it from the angle of the Raiders, and this could have been the plan the whole time for Tom Brady to trick Mike Mayock into spending money, because we all know that the Raiders are notoriously cheap, and if they knew they were going to have Max Crosby on the team next year, they wouldn't have gone out there and spent money on someone like Nakobe Dean, spent all of that money on Tyler Linderbaum, which is a huge deal for a center in the NFL right now. So it's like, you look at it for the other way, it's also Tom Brady kind of just tricking the Raiders into spending money, and now it's looking like he's going to stay on the team now.
Yeah, which is wild to me. Are they going to be able to keep the people they sign? Because they spent like it's like $280 million on free agents at this point, thinking that the $30 million that Max Crosby is owed is going to be off the books, and now it's unsure whether those deals are going to go through. Let's say for a fact that they do end up trading Max Crosby, they are not going to get 2 first-round picks now at this point. The Ravens have actually fucked the Raiders, and where he ends up going, if he ends up staying in Vegas or not, either way, I think they still have to trade Max Crosby. There's no way you can trade him and then just choose not to at the end of it. That just seems ridiculous.
Yeah, and it looks like as of right now, they're keeping him. I could see them waiting until the draft is over until they trade Max Crosby, because some of these NFL teams want to see if they're going to get their guy. Maybe you have an edge rusher that you prefer to have in the draft, and if you don't get him, then you'll go out there and make a trade after if someone else takes someone that you valued highly in the draft. So I could honestly see Max Crosby being traded in August, September, then teams can actually see how his physical is closer. But I do think there should be a standard in the NFL where you're not a trade can't be announced and it can't go through until the physical is done, and maybe you get around that through an agreed physician between the two teams, or you have the team's doctor. Obviously, you'll have some speculation on who the player is going to be going through, but if you're in a situation where this is right before free agency, the trade goes through, now you're looking up, you see pretty much 7 starters out the door for you if you're Baltimore, thinking how you need those picks and you can sign Trey Hendrickson when some people thought he might get a lot more money or there might be a much bigger market for him. There has to be a situation where the NFL steps in. They're like, yeah, no trades are going to go through until he passes that team's physical. So something like this doesn't happen during free agency. And then it's up to you if you want to decide if you want to go through that process, give up the compensation there, because there is a couple rumors about the Ravens could potentially lose draft picks if it comes out that Trey Hendrickson was the reason why they decided to axe this trade, because it's something like a MCL injury. Like, I get Max Crosby's older, but he's not even 30 yet. He's still 29 years old. Probably has a solid 2 or 3 years left. And also, Trey Hendrickson has struggled with injuries the past few years. So like there should be some concern there as well. But I do think those picks hold a lot of value there. So I think the NFL should just fundamentally take a look at how trades are approved.
Yeah, I would agree. I also think, apparently, according to the GM of the Ravens, they were interested in acquiring both of them. That's what they had said. But there's just too many things that don't line up. The salary cap wouldn't have worked. They have those first round picks that they dealt that now they need to recuperate because they just lost their best center. They just lost a few players on their defense as well. So going like backing out of the trade makes way too much sense for the Ravens, and it benefits the Ravens too much for it to just be a coincidence. The fact that they just because of the injury, because you already knew going into it that he was recovering from an injury, so you didn't expect him to be full strength. So there's just a lot of red flags throughout this entire move with them backing out of it. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't make sense as far as the Ravens. I could see him getting there, but for something like a MCL injury, I feel like that is one of those injuries that should be automatic at this point, and you should know what you're getting. I don't think the Raiders would particularly be hiding anything either. But hey, if you can save yourself from a bad trade in real time, you might as well go out there and do it. So credit to the Ravens, and then honestly for the Raiders, like this does make you a better team long term. But it would have been really nice to have those two number 1 overall picks because you have two potential picks you could have used to rebuild your team, and now you kind of have to reevaluate your whole draft process where maybe you can get Mendoza and a receiver to help him and rebuild your offensive line or trade one of those into more draft capital to draft more linemen, draft more help on your defense. But now you spent all of this money and you have to keep another big contract. And now it's kind of soured the market on Max Crosby where teams are a little bit hesitant on him, where I don't think anyone's going to give you the offer that the Ravens did. And then there was also the report that Tom Brady was holding back a New England Patriots trade for Max Crosby because he didn't want to do business with the Patriots. I'm like, what is that? Like, I hate to do that, Tucker Carlson, but like, what is that? Why can't Max Crosby go to the Patriots?
Yeah, I don't know what the hell Tom Brady's issue is with the Patriots. First, it started with I don't have a dog in this fight, which was complete bullshit. You spent 20 years in New England. You don't have a dog in this fight. Okay, buddy. And then now this Max Crosby deal, it went from maybe there's something there to there's no doubt about it. He's got some sort of beef with the Patriots at this point. People are going to argue, oh, he's an owner. Oh, he's an analyst. Oh, he has to be impartial. You're the GOAT of the NFL, and you spent 20 years of your life with the Patriots, and now you're foregoing trades to send your best player to the Patriots. You were a little bit weird when it came to the Drake May arrival. You didn't immediately, congratulate them there. So there's just a lot of very weird things going on with Tom Brady and the Patriots. I know they left on not great terms. It seems like they're good now, but yet again, like if you're not going to allow the team that just made the Super Bowl to make that trade and it's your former team, wouldn't you want to help them out? I go back to I remember Kevin McHale when he was the GM of the Timberwolves. He's like, oh, Danny Ainge. Oh, the Celtics, a team that I spent a lot of time with. Let me deal Kevin Garnett to my friend Danny Ainge and make the Celtics better because I have so much history there. My name is in the Celtics Hall of Fame. All these great things. No, Tom Brady, he doesn't give a shit.
And the weird thing is, everyone wanted to point at Bill Belichick as he's obviously the one that Tom Brady has an issue with, if there is an issue with New England, and he doesn't want to be under Belichick anymore. So you kind of take a look at that angle. But I also think Tom Brady has 7 championships, which is more than any other NFL franchise. The Steelers have 6, the Patriots have 6. So I do think there is something in him, like Eli Manning looking down at Peyton Manning winning his 2nd Super Bowl, and he's like, dang, I had one thing over Peyton, and that was having 2 Super Bowls. And I think there's a similar thing with Tom Brady, where I spent so much time there. Egotistically, I want to be the GOAT of the NFL, where I don't actually want another franchise to win more than 7 Super Bowls. And I at least want it to take a little bit longer. I don't want the Patriots to just come in with Drake May and win another Super Bowl or have another chance. I want them to be fun, competitive. It's fun to root for them, but I don't necessarily want another team to win maybe 7 or 8 Super Bowls, and then they have more rings total than Tom Brady, where it's more of the franchise instead of Tom Brady going to Tampa, winning a Super Bowl immediately, and kind of showing like, hey, I can also be the system for a franchise. It wasn't just New England; it was also had a lot to do with me and my leadership.
Yeah, I also think like watching the Patriots struggle with Mac Jones and Cam Newton and Bailey Zappi, all these guys, I think if you're someone like a former player like Tom Brady, you kind of want to see your old team struggle without you for a little bit. And they did to some extent, but not nearly as much as you saw with like the Dolphins still struggling without Dan Marino. The Saints for a while have struggled without Drew Brees. So like you see all these different examples of these teams struggling. The Broncos didn't make the playoffs for a decade post Peyton Manning. So it's like I feel like if you're an NFL great like those guys I mentioned, usually it comes with some suffering after the fact. But the Patriots, they had 4 years, they had 2 bad seasons. The other season they were competitive but not great, and then they're back in the Super Bowl. I think if you're someone like Tom Brady, who obviously has some bit of ego, as you would if you are Tom Brady, there's got to be something there.
Yeah, definitely something there. We'll always be here to speculate on it, but we probably won't get to the bottom of that for a long time until maybe Tom Brady releases a book. But we do have the second week of free agency, and there's some pretty interesting signings. So we're gonna brush over all the picks. We went through and went over every single signing last week. So if you want to see that, go ahead and check out our episode on our channel from last week. You'll have every single free agency signing. So we're just going to do the 1 or 2 that slipped through the cracks here and we think are interesting. And up first is the Bills. Surprise, surprise, they re-signed Dawson Knox, which kind of shocked me because everyone looked at their cap and he's like, obviously he'd be the easiest person to get rid of. And then you have Dalton Kincaid who can come in and replace him, but they are sticking with 2 tight ends. And they also signed Bradley Chubb, D. Alford, who is a cornerback, and then they just signed C.J. Gardner-Johnson today for a deal worth $6 million. This is going to be C.J. Gardner-Johnson's, I believe, 5th team in 5 years or 4th team in 5 years, something like that.
That sounds about right. Yeah, I mean, it's going to help their defense. Their defense is kind of below average at this point, but you go out, you get CJ Gardner Johnson or what's left of him. I think Bradley Chubb, that could be a good addition for them, but I still have my concerns on their offense. They still need a receiver, in my opinion. And then honestly, they could use an edge. They should be in the sweepstakes for Max Crosby if they can afford him. So I still think that even with their moves, I'm still not overly sold on the Bills, but step in the right direction for them.
Yeah, I don't think the cap would necessarily work for Max Crosby, but that's definitely something you can address in the draft, hopefully, even though your current general manager has not drafted a Pro Bowler in the last 5 years. Past half decade, you don't have a Pro Bowler selected in the first round. So that will be tough, but I do think you get a little bit better in the secondary, signing Geno Stone and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So solid signings for the Buffalo Bills, but that Dawson Knox one, everyone wanted to say he was gone. Write him off as a dead man. He's here to save the Buffalo Bills cap, but no, Dawson Knox is coming back. And then for Miami, they had a lot of signings actually in the past week because before they just had signed pretty much Malik Willis, and now they have Tutu Atwell.
Okay.
He always pops out of nowhere. Jalen Tolbert,
Okay.
Greg Dolch re-sign. They
Like
re-signed
that.
Ben Sims, tight end. Is that Ben Simmons switching to football? And then they have Charlie Heck, who they signed, Jameer Solaire, 2 tackles, and then they signed David Okunjobi, Josh Uche to a 1-year deal, re-signed a
Okay.
couple players, Matthew Butler and Willie Gay, and then they have Marco Wilson, Zane Anderson, Lonnie Johnson, and then they re-signed Riley Patterson, their kicker, and then they also signed Zane Gonzalez to a 1-year deal. So a lot of 1-year signings for the Miami Dolphins. It seemed like they just like hit the auto generate a team in Madden, and then this is what they got. It's like a lot of people that I feel like no one really knows who they are.
Yeah, or they're guys that are they pop out once a year. Tutu Atwell, that's a nice signing for them. Gives them wide receiver depth. You mentioned D. You say D4. Who was the corner they signed?
The corner they signed Marco Wilson. Yeah, they
Okay.
signed Marco Wilson, and then they re-signed Willie Gay, which is a good signing. I do like Josh Uche and David Okunjobi as well. And then they signed another defensive back was Lonnie Johnson. Lonnie Johnson, yeah.
I like the Josh Uche signing a lot. He's a stud. He was good for the Patriots. So we'll see if he carries over to Miami, but good signings for them overall.
Yeah, so they signed like over 10 players, including the re-sign. So Miami got busy after Malik Willis. So a lot of stuff going on in the East because last week the Patriots had only signed Tremont Jones, Elijah Vera Tucker, and then Reggie Gilman, who is a fullback. But they also signed Julian Hill, tight end. Kevin Byard agreed to a 1 year, $9 million deal. That is a great pickup. Also signed KJ Britt, another linebacker that'll help that core out. And then Romeo Warfor out there Dobbs is now a New England Patriots signing a massive 4 year, $70 million contract. And Patriots fans were losing their minds over this one.
Yeah. Yeah, everywhere. Patriots fans, oh my God, this isn't A.J. Brown. Oh my God, what a horrible signing. Where in the world? Romeo Dobbs is by no means a bad receiver. Is he your number one? Probably not. We saw what happened in Green Bay there, but he's a nice signing. He's a big physical receiver. He's going to be good with Drake May. Deep threat for him. So I like the signing a lot. I think it was 48 million guaranteed, up to $20 million a year, which for Romeo Dobbs, I think he's earned that. I think it's a little bit higher than you'd expect, but overall, well, I like this deal a lot for the Patriots. I think he's going to be a great fit.
Yeah, and Romeo Dobbs had 124 yards versus the Bears in the wild card round. Like, did no one watch the first round of the playoffs last year? Like, I think in the playoffs, Romeo Dobbs played a lot better than Stephon Diggs. And Stephon Diggs is older. And then also, where is AJ Brown? Like, AJ Brown is also another older wide receiver where I don't necessarily don't not want AJ Brown the Patriots, but I don't want them to trade for AJ Brown and then suddenly think that's good enough. But I think what Romeo Dobbs does is he is a receiver who can be a solidified number two for your team. And he's someone who had a really good rapport for Jordan Love. And he wasn't necessarily the best receiver on the Packers, but I think he was someone that Jordan Love would go to in critical situations, and he was someone that was kind of the quarterback's favorite receiver to go to. So I do think that Romeo Dobbs, as far as a culture fit for the Patriots, is probably one of the best fits. The fact that it's not even it's like about $40 million guaranteed. Like that's not too much for Romeo Dobbs. And then you didn't have to overpay for someone like Alec Pierce either, and he could probably give you close to number one production, but he's probably going to be a solid number two where maybe he gets around 800 yards, 8 touchdowns.
That's kind of been his entire career too. Like if you look at the average over the last 4 years, it's been about 700 to 800 yards. You get about 6 touchdowns. He doesn't get a lot of targets. He got about 85 last year, caught 55 of them. So he's going to catch 65% of his throws. He's going to have about 700 to 800 yards, and he's going to have about 6 to 7 touchdowns. So honestly, for 40 million guaranteed over 4 years, upwards of 20 if he's good, fantastic. I think that's a great step in the right direction. The receiver core is better.
Yeah, and he's someone who'll come in and he won't be a headache, and you know who at least has another solid 4 or 5 years. And you signed him to a 4 year deal, and then he'll be able to help players like Kyle Williams. And then also you can still go out there and get one in the draft because you have two needs in the draft, really, which is offensive lineman and wide receiver. Maybe a tight end too.
Yeah. So I think it's a nice signing overall. And moving on from Stephon Diggs, you get somebody who's a little bit more mannered and, not going to jail. So step in the right direction.
Yeah, it was nice that they waited to arrest him until after the Super Bowl, though. So I thought that was a good gesture for Stephon Diggs.
Thanks.
And then the Jets, really the only thing we're talking about is they got their guy at quarterback. Genocide Geno Smith is now a Jet again.
I think like life is an endless loop, right? Like everything comes back to square one eventually. Geno Smith struggled in New York. He bounced around. He played for the Chargers. He played for the Giants. He played for the Seahawks. Then eventually the Raiders, and all of that, all of his growth, comeback player of the year candidate, just to return to the Big Apple. And I saw that. Prayers out for Geno Smith. Poor guy. He escaped the rat race of New York only to return with one of the worst teams in the league. God bless Geno Smith. I wish him the best.
Yeah, and the Jets have still not signed a offensive skill player outside of tagging Brees Hall. They re-signed a running back that no one can pronounce their last name, Kenny Kawagnu, and then they also re-signed their fullback. But the Jets have not signed a single skill player on offense. Mind you, Garrett Wilson led this team in receiving last year, and he missed pretty much every game after week 6 or 7. So he missed over half the season and led the team in receiving. So I feel like that's the number one thing for the Jets that still stands out for me is like, where are the skill players? Where's the offense going to come from?
Literally outside of Garrett Wilson, there's no other receiver. So all you need to do is double Garrett Wilson and then maybe plug the gap. And outside of that, if you can stop Brees Hall and double Garrett Wilson, that's it. They have no one else that they can rely on.
All right, we move on to the North. The Ravens, while we were gone, had a small trade fall through, and now that we're back, they signed Trey Hendrickson to a 4-year, $112 million deal. Only $60 million is fully guaranteed, though, with a max value of $120. And then they also signed Durham Smythe, kind of replacing Isaiah Likely there. But Trey Hendrickson now a Raven, and they didn't need to give up 2 first-round picks for it.
Love to see it.
And then we move on. The Bengals, they didn't really do anything worth noting. The Browns, note again, they signed Jack Stoll, but no skill players for a team that is very wide receiver needy. You need a running back, you need a wide receiver, and I guess you signed 4 offensive linemen, which is crazy. And then you acquired 1 from a trade. You re-signed Tevin Jenkins, and then you signed Zion Johnson and Eggleton Jenkins. And then after that, it's like you got a defensive tackle, but another team that still needs skill players.
Not according to the Cleveland Browns.
And then the Steelers. Wow, they signed Cam Hayward to a 2-year extension. That's crazy.
Okay.
I mean, how much longer is this guy going to play for? I feel like for the past 5 years, there's been conversations about him retiring, and now they extend him up until 2027. It's a weird position, but we've seen some kind of longevity in that defensive lineman position where you look at Calais Campbell now, who's played for a really long time. Now Cam Hayward's been playing for a long time. Interesting.
Yeah, there's some weird longevity. And he doesn't have the same longevity that he used to, but I mean, he's not this past year, but the year prior, he was an all-pro. So Cam Hayward still has it. He kind of had a bit of a down year this past year, but 7-time Pro Bowler, full-time all-pro. So I like it for him. He's been a lifelong Steeler, so let him retire there. I think I like that overall.
Yeah, and then outside of that, they signed Jaquan Brisker to a 1-year deal, and then Darnell Savage at safety. So you sign 2 more people for your secondary, along with Jamel Dean, who's essentially replacing, blanking on his name right now, but he's one of their top corners for the past 2 years, and now he's retiring.
Darius Slay?
Darius Slay. Yeah, Darius Slay is retiring, and now you essentially replace him with Jamel Dean, get 2 safeties. So solid for the North there. Um, the Texans have not really done anything new since last week. The Colts, I know you were excited about this one. They re-signed Mo Alley Cox. Everyone was wondering where
Yes.
Mo Alley Cox is gonna go.
And I know that the Colts do love Cox. He's been a great ad for them all his whole time. He spent his entire career there. And he's back. I mean, 13 catches, 117. That's not production you can get anywhere else. So I'm glad they brought him back for what will be his 9th NFL season.
And then let's go down to the Jaguars. Haven't really done anything new. They signed Chris Rodriguez to a 2-year, $10 million deal. Nothing notable. I'm scrolling through here, and the Titans have changed their logo, which is kind of trippy on here. And then, wow, they've just signed so many people for the Titans, and it's a lot of good players, but no one really new. Um, Broncos haven't really signed anybody new. Yeah, everyone for the Broncos is a re-sign. Breaking news today, or we'll go over this because we're gonna preview the AFC and NFC West, so we'll go over those teams later. The Dallas Cowboys, though, they signed Sam Howell to be their backup quarterback.
That's a choice. I mean, good for them. I don't know if he's going to be a great backup for you, but you pair him with Joe Milton. If anything happens to Dak, be the third string. We haven't seen too much from him to say that he is going to be able to fold the front, but you know what? He's somebody. He's a body. He might not make it through training camp, but we shall see.
And then the Giants are still getting busy. They've spent a lot of money and they're trying to improve this roster. And they signed, while we are gone, they signed Darnell Mooney, Kelvin Austin, Isaiah Likely. We already went over Trayman Edmonds, but they also signed two safeties and a corner as well. They signed Greg Newsome the second. Then they signed Jason Pinnock and Ardarius Washington. Then they also signed punter Jordan Stout as well. So the Giants, Darnell Mooney, really solid too. You lose Wandale Robinson. I think he is a serviceable replacement, and I think he's a solid 3. Then you also get Calvin Austin, which is another solid player. Isaiah Likely coming over from the Ravens as well on a $40 million deal, which is pretty serviceable for 3 years.
Yeah, I like the receiver signings. Darnell Mooney as your 3. That's not too bad. You still have Scattaboo. You have neighbors there. Jalen Hyatt, we'll see what we get out of him. And they're probably going to draft a receiver as well. So I like those ads. I like what they've done on defense this offseason. So the Giants, we've talked about it before, but a team that is definitely in line for a Patriots type go up next year. I think the Giants are next in line. 3-14 or 4-13 last year. I can see them doubling their win totals.
Yeah, really depends on health there for Jackson Dart. And then Philadelphia, last week they had signed Jordan Davis, and that was it. But now this week, they signed Rick Woolen to a 1-year, $12 million fully guaranteed deal, up to $15 million. Then they signed Arnold Ebiketie, Johnny Munt, and then they also signed Jonathan Jones to a 1-year deal, and then punter Braden Mann. So solid pickup after losing Nakobe Dean. You get another linebacker. You can also address that in the draft, but you probably get the best corner available in Rick Woolen, who's kind of had his ups and downs, where his rookie year he was really good, and then his second year not so good for him, maybe dealing with some injuries.
Yeah, I love the Rick Woolen signing. He's a stud. His first year was definitely his best year, but he's still, I think, in the right system, could be really great for them. And then you also mentioned that they signed, who was the other defensive play that they signed that you just mentioned?
For the Eagles, they signed Arnold Ebiketie and Jonathan Jones as well.
And John Jones. John Jones is a stud too. He's more of going to be like their punt man, most likely, but I think he's going to be a nice addition for them as well. But Rick Woolen, Love that signing for the Eagles.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a good signing, and it's a 1 year deal. So I could see the Eagles potentially keeping AJ Brown, pushing all their chips into the table this year with Sirianni, because hey, the years he got to the Super Bowl, he's just had a gap year in between. That's totally normal for a coach. And then we move on to the Commanders, and at this point, it's who haven't the Commanders signed, because there's over 20 players listed here, but the one that jumps out to me is they signed running back Jerome Ford to replace Chris Rodriguez.
Ooh, I love that.
Sleeper.
Jerome Ford's a stud player. They've had some injuries. I know they also signed Rashad White, but he's a guy that if they
De'Ami
need him to
Brown,
fill
too.
in, yeah, he could be an absolute stud for them if they need him to.
And then we move on to the NFC North with the Bears. Um, they signed Khalif Raymond since we've been gone. And then they also signed Contavious Street. Um, And then outside of that, yeah, pretty much everyone else we went over. But Khalif Raymond, that's a sneaky pickup as far as just a nice receiver to have. He's just a solid guy to have on your team for depth.
Yeah, that's kind of a heartbreaking loss for me for as far as Detroit because he's kind of gone up with them. He's kind of had his resurgence there. He's kind of established himself, not necessarily as an elite receiver, but as a guy that's a good depth player. And the fact that they were able to poach him from Detroit, that's a loss that you might not think much about on paper. It's not even reported. You didn't see anything from ESPN about it, but sneaky nice ad for the Bears and honestly an underrated loss for the Lions. So that's going to be he's been kind of like the heartblood of their team in the locker room. So kind of a big loss for the Lions, whether it'll be reported or not.
Yeah, I think with Nikola Tesla, he's gonna step into that role, kind of fill in for them. So I think that's why the Lions would let someone like him go for a little bit more money somewhere else. But we do have the Lions, and it's been tough for the Lions because they didn't make the playoffs last year after having back-to-back historic seasons for their franchise, and now a little bit down on them last week with their signings. But since we've left, they did sign Isaiah Pacheco, Tyler Conklin, Cade Mays, and they also signed Larry Borum, and they re-signed Malcolm Rodriguez, and they signed Roger McCreary and Rock Yassin. They also re-signed and signed safety Christian Eisen. So we're starting to see them fill out their roster a little bit more, and now we're replacing Sonic and Knuckles with Pacheco now.
Yeah, and Isaiah Pacheco, he's a great fit for Detroit. He runs hard. I like that signing a lot for him. Someone to pair alongside him, a younger bit of blood compared to David Montgomery. So I like that signing a lot. And then Rocky Sin helps up their secondary a little bit. So underrated signings, but I think these are nice. These are a step in the right direction for them.
Yeah, step in the right direction, especially if you get a healthy Pacheco. I think after dealing with Jameer Gibbs, if you have Pacheco coming in as a guy where the Chiefs put him in an unfair position where I don't think he's a number one running back, but I think he's a really, 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 really good number two running back. And they put him in a tough position where they didn't have any receivers. Travis Kelsey is old, so they're really relying on him and Mahomes to create all of the offense where they didn't have a great running back to go along with him, and they didn't have star receivers to really open up the game. So I think he kind of got a rough shake where teams were really just game planning for him when they'd go up against the Kansas City Chiefs instead of a running back by committee where against the Eagles in the Super Bowl, he had some incredible games. So if he's just going to be a spark plug for the Lions, I love that, especially since you're only paying him $1 million.
Yeah, that's a great deal for them.
And then a great deal for the Packers. They signed Sky Moore.
Did they really?
Yeah.
No way. Well, I mean, if I wish I was as high on Sky Moore as I was out of the draft. I thought he was going to be an absolute stud, but he goes to Green Bay. Last year he had 5 catches for 87 yards, so I mean, maybe they can get more out of him than what San Francisco did, but interesting signing nonetheless. Not sure if that's going to break the bank for them or not, but um, get some wide receiver depth while you're at it.
Yeah, and so Sky Moore's career begins. What's the game everyone plays when you have to name the player who's played for all 4 teams. I'm blanking on the name of it, but
We're talking about like grids or
Grids, yeah. He
immaculate grid.
started his Grids career for Sky Moore. And then someone else who started their Grids career, the Vikings revised the contract for Aaron Jones to take his base salary from 9 million to 5.5. So save about 3.5 million, and then they also signed a little quarterback named Kyler Murray, who is a longtime Vikings fan, and this was really the only team that made sense for Kyler Murray. Couldn't really see him with the Jets. There were people in the Jets organization warning him not to go there. And then he goes to Minnesota now, probably the most talent of his career since he had DeAndre Hopkins and A.J. Brown on that team. You had Rondell Moore, rest in peace, on that team. And you had James Conner. You went 7-0, and that was really the only great Kyler Murray year. And then for the Vikings, you only sign him to a 1-year deal. It's not too big of a risk. And J.J. McCarthy is still young and in a position where he can sit back and learn. So you can kind of have them compete in training camp because you're not committing that much money to Kyler Murray. And then the one thing to keep in mind, though, is Kyler Murray has only played a full NFL season once in his career, and that was 2024.
Yeah. I think overall for both teams, it works out well. Kyler Murray, really the best that we saw out of him was when they had him and Cliff Kingsbury together. And I do think that Kevin O'Connell is a better coordinator or just better coach than Cliff Kingsbury. And you're going to get Justin Jefferson. He can throw the deep ball well. You have Jordan Addison to pair alongside him, plus TJ Hawkinson. So for Kyler, I think this is the most talented roster he's been on. You have good coaching there again. So if he's going to resurrect his career, he's going to do it here and probably get paid next year when he gets another deal. But overall, I think it's a good sign for both of them. Vikings, I think, are a little bit better today than they were yesterday. And I think Kyler, I think he could be good for them. Maybe not top 10 good, but he's going to be, I think, a good average quarterback.
Yeah, and I think just the pressure he's going to have in Minnesota, I don't think the expectations are going to be wildly high. I think a lot of people are already skeptical about him going to the Minnesota Vikings, where there's probably not going to be a ton of pressure on you. And then also the defense for Minnesota next year is probably going to be the best defense that he's ever had, especially you still have Beeflo there as the coordinator. And, you know, Kevin O'Connell, say what you will about him, he has gotten the most out of some quarterbacks. I mean, J.J. McCarthy had 300-plus yard passing games and 3+ touchdown games last year, which is something only J.J. McCarthy at his age has done. And now you're going to have Kyler Murray there in an offense where you really just need a run game, but he adds a extra dynamic threat where you still have Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, and Justin Jefferson. And Kyler Murray throws a beautiful deep ball. So is he going to get them far in the playoffs? I don't think necessarily, but I do think they're going to be right there competing for a wild card spot. And I would put them probably in the same category as the Cowboys going into next season, because you do have a lot of talent there. And it just depends on what Kyler Murray you're still going to get. But you have to start out fast, especially with his injury issues, because he plays really well in September, October, and then he hits the Call of Duty wall in November.
Yeah, and that's going to be the big thing for him. Is he going to be able to shake that? I don't know. I think if there's any time that he's had the stacks chipped against him, it's going to be this year. And if he wants to get another big contract before he eventually rides off into the sunset, this is his prove it year. So he has all the recipe to do so. So if he can get out of his Call of Duty slump, then I think come next offseason, he'll be a relatively high-ticketed item for the free agency class.
And I could also see Kyler next year, if he's just setting himself up for another job and maybe the Vikings don't pay him a ton of money. I could see him going to Houston as someone because he played in OU, and I could also see him like if the Texans don't want to pay CJ Stroud and CJ Stroud has another stinker year in the playoffs, I could see them maybe bringing in Kyler Murray to Houston as the destination where Sam Darnold goes to the Vikings, has a great year, walks, wins a Super Bowl in Seattle. Kyler Murray has a great year, walks, loses in the second round as a Houston Texan.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun. He's a Texas native, um, grew up in Texas, so yeah, I would like that a lot. That'd be a great signing.
And then I looked it up too. Kyler Murray, there's not a noticeable dip in his stats either playing in the cold. I was like seeing, is Lambeau or Chicago going to be a problem? And no.
He's been pretty
Like,
good in the
look,
cold historically.
yeah, he had a really good game against the Philadelphia Eagles where he brought them back. And now he's also going to be playing in a dome for half his games. And then Detroit is also a dome. So I like it for Kyler. And the Vikings, like, you still have JJ McCarthy. And the thing is, both of them have injury issues. So you at least have someone like JJ McCarthy who's been there a year, who you're not paying a ton of money. And I don't think a lot of teams looked at him last year and like, oh my God, you have Kyler Murray now. Let me pick up the phone and see if JJ McCarthy's available. Like, that's not happening. I don't think it is, but
Yeah, I can also say like the last few years in Arizona, a breakup was imminent, especially after Cliff Kingsbury left. You didn't have a great receiver core. You had dysfunction in the locker room. The head coach wasn't the right fit. So if there's any place that you're going to fail, it's really like the Browns, the Jets, and then the Cardinals. And what he did in Arizona, the little amount that he did, he's still going to go down as maybe their best quarterback outside of maybe Kurt Warner and Carson Palmer. But for quarterbacks that they've drafted, he's definitely their best.
Carson Palmer still kind of the goat in Arizona. And then we go to the Falcons. Didn't really do much. They lost Darnell Mooney though, huge loss. And then Carolina hasn't done too much either. Um, since we did week 1 of free agency, the Saints, taking a look at them, haven't done too much worth noting. The Bucks, same thing. And then we're on to the West. And that brings us to the NFC West. We didn't recap the AFC or NFC West because we're going to be doing our kind of preseason overall, give our thoughts on what they did last year and heading into this year if we're hopeful with what they need to do in the draft. So now we have a little bit of an idea on their free agencies for these teams, and then we go through each team's draft needs as well, and then if we think they'll actually be good, especially with their coach, kind of give you our predictions for who's going to be the best team, the worst team, and the most surprising team in the division. So why don't we go ahead and start with the NFC West? I have the players that they signed if you want to quickly bring up the players that they lost in free agency. Most notably, they lost Kyler Murray. They have another head coach at this point, and they signed Matt LaFleur's brother, Mike LaFleur. And he is now going to be their new head coach. And then they have signed Gardner Minshew to a 1-year deal, Tyler Algier, Kendrick Bourne, Semi Foko. They re-sign. They sign guard Matt Pryor, Isaac Semue, offensive guard Elijah Wilson. They also signed defensive lineman Andrew Billings, re-signed LJ Collier, signed Roy Lopez, signed Jonah Williams to their defensive line, also signed safety Andrew Wingard. So a lot of activity for the Cardinals, and noticeably, they signed 3 new offensive guards on this team to take care of their offensive line. So a lot of activity, and you get Kendrick Bourne, who's a solid receiver, Tyler Algier, who's a solid running back, and Gardner Minshew, who is a pretty good backup to go along with Jacoby Brissett while you're finding your way and potentially trying to go out there and find your quarterback. And, maybe you trade for someone like Anthony Richardson, or you just look to the draft this year. But overall, with where the Cardinals are selecting and who they signed this year, what are your thoughts on them this offseason, and what else do they need in the draft?
Yeah. So honestly, for me, I like the Tyler Algier signing a lot. James Conner's coming back from injury. Tyler Algier has kind of been overshadowed by Bijan Robinson in Atlanta, but he's been a really solid back. I like the pairing with him and Connor. Gardner Minshew is going to be a legend in Arizona. I can already tell. He's going to have a 4 to 5 game stretch where maybe he makes a nice comeback. There's an overtime win, and he's cemented his legacy in Arizona. So I like the Gardner Minshew signing. He's going to be a great fit in the Tempe area. And then, other than that, they got Devin Duvernay, who I think is a nice addition. The receiver core is a little bit stronger than it was last year, which was something they struggled with. And then offensive line, they do have the third overall pick. If I'm them, I would attack maybe edge rusher. They have Josh Sweat. They have a couple other nice linebackers. Mac Wilson's nice, but they could really use a good pass rush, and I think they'll be able to pick one at pick 3. Um, Offensive line's always a problem for them, so they can always use that. But I think the big thing for them defensively is going to be where they should focus. Buda Baker's getting a little bit older. Maybe you can pair someone alongside him. Will Johnson was a hit for them this past draft. He's been good for them, but honestly, their focus should be pass rush and offensive line help.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing for Arizona is they don't really have too many glaring holes at their skill positions on offense, which is a unique position to be in, I feel like, for a team like this, because you sign 3 offensive guards and you pretty much shore up the interior of your offensive line. So now you just need to address right tackle in the draft. And you have James Conner, who's coming back from injury, but you also signed Tyler Algier. So you don't necessarily need a running back, but you maybe spend like a third or a fourth round pick on one and see if you can hit a stroke of luck. But really, all you need right now is focus on that defense in the draft, specifically just getting a edge rusher, and then this year can be a solid rebuild year until you find your quarterback. But overall, the Cardinals are the worst team in NFL history, but you have one of the LaFleur brothers taking over as your head coach and Matt LaFleur's brother, and now you go out there, spend some solid money on the defense, you sign 4 defensive linemen. One of them was just a re-sign, and then you also sign 2 safeties in Andrew Wingard and KC Craters. So honestly, I'm kind of optimistic for the Cardinals as far as they finished last year with a lot of close competitive teams, and for a bad team, you just want to see that they still have some fight. They're still going out there trying, and now you just need to fill your quarterback position, and you don't have too many needs or holes on your offense outside of right tackle now, and then you just need to attack that defense in the draft.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're going to do. Maybe they go edge rusher. You already know I'm going to say his name. Jeremiah Love is another guy. If you want to move on from James Conner in training camp, you get a guy who we've seen teams be successful when they draft a running back early and what that can do for their offense. The Falcons with Bijan made a step forward, having him. We know what Saquon's done, so maybe they go that route if they want to be aggressive offensively, if they do plan to get a quarterback in the next year's draft. So that's what they may do. Maybe they shore up their offensive line, but they got a lot of talent that's available for them at that 3 spot, whether it's linebacker, whether it's edge rusher, or if they want to go running back. I think either way, this team, it's unfortunate that they're in a division as stacked as the NFC West, but from 3-14, maybe they go 6-11, but build for the future and potentially get their quarterback either this draft or wait till next draft when it's going to be stronger.
Yeah, so overall, to recap, I'm feeling pretty positive about the Cardinals offseason so far with who they've signed. You haven't lost anyone too horrible. You part ways with Kyler Murray, but that opens up the door to go out there, get another quarterback. But this is still the worst team in NFL history, so we do have to keep that context in mind. But are you, in summary, feeling positive about the Cardinals' future?
Yeah, it's small moves, but they're moves that I think are going to pay off for them. Tyler Algier, Gardner Minshew. It's not going to be a team that is fighting for their division, but it's also not a team that's going to be a team that shouldn't even be on television so bad. So I think they're going to be competitive, similar to how they were last year, but maybe with their new head coach, deliver on some of those wins. I think there is going to be a win improvement. 2 to 3 wins is what I predict so far, but definitely I would give them a thumbs up for what they've done so far this offseason.
And then for Gardner, this also might be the most offense he's ever played for, as far as for Gardner Minshew, because he came into the league and he was with the Jaguars. Pretty bad offensive
Bad team.
line. Didn't have too many great skill players. He's played for the Raiders. I mean, he was the Raiders era with Josh McDaniels, I believe, when he was there, and then he was also with the Raiders. Um, when they had some pretty bad offenses, and then he goes to the Chiefs, seemingly probably the worst offense the Chiefs have ever had last year, and I don't think he's played for too many teams with a high flying offense. So you have Marvin Harrison Jr., who should be improving. You even have Michael Wilson there. You have one of the better tight ends in the league. Now you have Tyler Algier and James Conner, who's coming back. So I do think this will probably be some of the best talent that Gardner Minshew's played with. Also Jacoby Brissett as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be nice. And I do think there's going to be a moment where Gardner Minshew does play. And I think he's going to play fairly well for them. So I'm excited. I think he's going to be a hit. Arizona's going to love him there.
Oh, he's definitely a fit there. And then we move on to the Rams. Who isn't a fit with the Rams, if we're being honest? They re signed Tyler Higbee, re signed David Quessenberry, signed linebacker Grant Stewart. They traded for Trent McDuffie with the Kansas City Chiefs, and they gave the Kansas City Chiefs 2 first-round picks to rebuild their team. I mean, come on.
And he
No one
passed
can
his
forgive them
physical.
for that. And he passed his physical, too. And then they also signed Jalen Watson at corner, re-sign Cam Curl, and then they also sign Joe Cardona as well. If you take a look at really the Rams' needs that they had coming into this year, is pretty much just defensive secondary help and offensive line depth, and they already have pretty much addressed that. And they gave up their first round pick because now they can just focus on the draft. You have Trent McDuffie, who's one of the best corners in the NFL at this point. So now the Rams are set up to be better than they were last year. They have Devontae Adams, and then they're going to have some of their other running backs come in. I think in the draft, you probably focus on offensive line and then seeing if Sean McVay can hit on another running back just for some more depth, because I like Kyron Williams. But when it comes to paying Kyron Williams a bag, which I think they have to do in the next year or two, it's not someone I would want to overpay for. And I think some team is dumb enough to do that.
Yeah, I think the Rams, I mean, I thought they were the best team last year. They fell short in the playoffs, but they get Trent McDuffie. That's automatically going to make them better. They have a decent secondary now. We already know how good Jared Verse is. We already know some of the other draft picks that they've landed the last few years. Obviously, Puka and Devontae is great. So their offense is fine. Realistically, if you can get someone to pair with Blake Corum and Kyron Williams, that could be great, because I don't think they're going to sign Kyron Williams to a long-term deal. But outside of that, it's really just depth at this point. This team should be the best team in the NFC West next year, especially with some of the losses the Seahawks and Niners may have had. So, yeah, I mean, this team should be 13-4, 14-3 next year, and vying for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and really all they need is depth on their offensive line, and then after that, it's is Matthew Stafford going to play for a long time? But they're going into the draft already taking care of their biggest need, which is corner, and then if they can hit on some other picks, this team's going to be really scary. But overall, do you think the Rams are kind of going to be the same team, or do you think we have another team in Seattle? Do you think with all the teams, all the players that Seattle has lost, they should be the favorite in the West?
I put them as the favorite. Absolutely. They had secondary issues last year. They get one of the best corners in the league. You already had a great offense who just won the MVP. So, like, absolutely, I think the Rams should be the favorite. And actually, surprisingly, let me double check this for sure, but I'm pretty sure the Rams actually still have a first round pick. I'm going to just fact check that real quick because it's. Yeah, they have the 13th overall pick, it looks like, from Atlanta. So they still have a first round pick that they can go and use. They got it from Atlanta. I'm not entirely sure where they got it from Atlanta, but they can still make a move and still draft someone in the first round. And then they also have a second and third round pick as well. So if they want to swing high, they could go after maybe draft someone to replace Devontae. I do love Jordan Tyson. He would be a nice fit there. So I think the Rams, they should be the favorites so far. Niners are old, and the Seahawks lost a lot of people. So right now, if we're doing of this upcoming season, I think the Rams should be the favorites.
Yeah, definitely probably the favorites in the NFC. And the reason why is because of the Seattle Seahawks having some key free agency departures. And I don't normally start with who left the team, but this is a Super Bowl team, and you kind of already got to the top of the mountain. It's pretty rare that you repeat, especially with a guy like Sam Darnold. And you have safety Kobe Bryant signed with the Bears. Boye Mafe signed with the Bengals. Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker III signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. And then cornerback Rick Woolen signed with the Eagles. And then you lost a no-name receiver that no one has ever heard of. But for Seattle, those are some pretty big free agency losses. And then the only person you re-signed was Rashid Shaheed, Josh Joby, and offensive tackle Josh Jones. And then you get Rodney Thomas and Emmanuel Wilson. I guess Emmanuel Wilson's a fine running back, but you're really just re-signing a couple guys, and you have some pretty massive losses in Boye Mafe, who's really your pass rush, especially with some of the older players on that defensive line. You'd think he'd be someone you'd want to keep around.
Yeah, I'm nervous about them. Their defense is still going to be really solid. I think their running game, Zach Charbonnet is coming off of a major injury, and they're going to probably need to go and address the running back position come this next offseason because you lose Kenneth Walker. That's a huge loss for them. And then some of the offensive help, the defensive help, Boye Mafe, he was the lead leaguer in sacks a couple of years ago. They lose Tariq Woolen, who's been really good for them. So some really huge losses that I don't know if one draft is going to be able to fill for them. So, I mean, last year they were 14-3. I can see them having a 4 or 5 win regression. Plus, you add the Super Bowl hangover to the mix to that. Seahawks, I don't know, are going to make the playoffs next year.
Yeah, and I think with them, they did take a Menahu last year, which I think is a really solid sign for them that they can still draft high-level talent, especially having Mike McDonald in the building. So I think their angle is going to be, okay, we won a Super Bowl. Let's roll out there and see if we can rebuild this team in the draft without having to pay big name guys, because I can't blame you for not paying a running back, especially if you want to continue to compete for a Super Bowl. But like, the biggest one for me is going to be Boye Mafe. I think that's going to be the most production you're going to have to make up for. But I do believe in Mike McDonald, do believe in his schemes there. It's just how long is Sam Darnold going to keep this going? So definitely the most question marks in this division for the Seattle Seahawks so far, because the 49ers last year, pretty much everyone on their team died, didn't play, and their number one receiver by the time they got to the divisional round against the Seattle Seahawks was Ricky Pearsall. And then Tungus, their backup tight end, I believe. And then now they signed Mike Evans and Christian Kirk, and they've signed to wide receiver. And then they also signed new offensive tackles in Verdarian Lowe, Brett Toth, and then they acquired Osa Chubuzie from the Cowboys on the defensive line, and then they brought back Trey Greenlaw from the Broncos, signed Nate Hobbs at corner, and then looks like they re-signed Eddie Pinheiro as well. But they fixed the wide receiver position. Probably still going to draft another wide receiver as well there. So that's going to loosen it up a lot for Brock Purdy, especially because Mac Jones was able to do it with Kendrick Bourne being his go-to guy, and the 49ers were able to stay afloat last year. So if anyone doubted Kyle Shanahan's coaching ability in the regular season last year, I think that was a huge demonstration of what he can do as a coach. And now you add 2 legit wide receivers to that room, probably Brandon Ayuk out the door as well, so you don't have to deal with that behind the scenes. And then in the draft, you can pretty much just focus on everything else you need, which is going to be defensive line and interior offensive line and secondary, and you don't need to stress about hitting on a wide receiver because it can be tough for some teams. 49ers, they've been okay, not necessarily the best team in the world at drafting them, though.
Yeah, they've done a good enough job that I trust them, but I think now that you have Mike Evans, you have Christian Kirk, Ricky Pearsall, that's a good receiver room. If you can get anything for Brandon Ayuk at this point, go ahead. But they can spend maybe a 3rd or 4th round pick on a wide receiver, rather than a first or second round pick, which is probably what they needed to do prior to the offseason starting. At that point, focus on getting a better, getting your pass rush in line. You still have Nick Bosa, who is had turned 30 earlier. So you have him. Fred Warner will return. For a team that was 12-5 last year, I think they are better roster-wise than they were last year. I think they exceeded expectations this past year. This year, I think 12-5 is attainable for them, maybe 11-6, but honestly, like, address your corner situation and maybe get another pass rusher, and 49ers should be right up there with the Rams as long as they can stay healthy and get away from their 5G practice facility.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. For me though, when I think about the 49ers, I see these signings in Christian Kirk and Mike Evans and I automatically think, "Oh, they should go out there and win the division because they gave the Rams trouble and they beat the Rams on Thursday Night Football." It's kind of started a Thursday Night Football streak for me. But then I also think about it, I'm like, "Wait a minute, who did they lose on defense who doesn't play? Bob. Bob went to the Titans and he has his all bald coaching staff now in Tennessee, in Nashville, and they're trying to turn that franchise around. But I do think you can't underestimate the loss of Robert Saleh for this team because we've seen them lose great coordinators before on defense, and it's definitely impacted this team before, especially a team that's gotten older and was severely injured on that side of the ball last year. So I do think losing Robert Saleh is going to be one of those sneaky ones where it's like, okay, maybe the defense actually does take a step back because Kyle Shanahan can't necessarily fix everything.
Yeah, I don't think it's nothing. I mean, we saw even just last year when the Lions lost Ben Johnson, that was not the same offense. And I think Robert Saleh, great coordinator. You lose him, that's going to make an impact for him. My big thing for the Niners, my biggest concern for them, honestly, has to do with how old they are. They want to get younger, and they go out and get Mike Evans, who's a 13-year vet. Christian Kirk's been in the league a long time. Then you have guys like Fred Warner, who's been in the league a long time. Nick Bosa's been there a long time. Christian McCaffrey has a lot of wear on those tires at this point, and he's still a very great running back. But when does that start to show? If I had any worries, the Rams, they're a pretty young team considering it. Outside of Matt Stafford, they're a fairly young team. Where the Niners, a lot of these guys are in their late 20s, early 30s, sometimes even late 30s. So that's my biggest worry there is like we see these old teams, sometimes they can make a push, but I think that's going to be their biggest kryptonite is how old this team is because they haven't done any favors this offseason getting any younger.
Yeah, because Mike Evans, again, is still old, and you signed him to a 3-year deal. Christian Kirk, he's not necessarily an old player, but he's been kicking around the league for a
And had some
minute
injuries.
now. So I would say, yeah, for the 49ers, I'm optimistic heading into next year that they can still make the playoffs, especially with what Brock Purdy was putting together with so little help in the playoffs last year. They went out there and beat Philadelphia, but I think the biggest tell will be on defense. I think schematically it's not necessarily going to be the same without Robert Saleh. So out of the teams in the NFC West hot seat question, who do you think's going to take the biggest step back?
I think it's the Seahawks. With all their losses, I think this year they may have exceeded expectations. Sam Darnold was good for them, but you lose your best running back, you lose your best edge rusher, and a bunch of other great players leave. They were 14-3. Can I see them have a 5-win regression, especially following a Super Bowl? Absolutely. So biggest regression by far is the Seahawks.
All right. Who do you think wins the division?
I think right now I would say the Rams, but they'll be competing with the Niners. Gun to my head, it's the Rams right now. I think talent-wise, they don't have many holes. Matt Stafford, if he can play like an MVP again, then this team should win the division.
Cardinals over under 6.5 wins. If that comes out, you like that? Taking the under still.
Not quite. I think 6.5 is a perfect spread because I think they're going to be 6-11. Like if I had to guess, gun to my head, they win 6 games. I don't think they're going to have 7. So I would take the under, but it's not a negative under. It's just I think they're going to be at 6 wins exactly.
All right. Well, we just covered the NFC West. For the four of you watching right now, Like, comment, who is gonna be the winner of their division? Do you think the Seahawks take a step back, losing Boye Mafe and Reek Woolen? I do see there are people watching, so make sure you hit like or dislike if you don't like the show. And then also comment who you think is gonna be the biggest surprise in the NFC West. We'll go with that. And then we go over to the AFC West, which has some really interesting teams. I feel like all four of these teams have something interesting to offer, but we'll start out with the Denver Broncos. They are the reigning Super Bowl champions right now, or the reigning division champions, not Super Bowl champions. I have no idea where my mind just went. I apologize. And then you have the Broncos here. They re-signed Sam Etlinger. They re-signed J.K. Dobbins, and they pretty much every single move that they made was a re-sign. They lose. They don't lose too many big pieces either. But this is a team that's going to focus on building in the draft, focusing on getting younger right now. Still have Sean Payton there, still have Bo Nix. But for the Broncos, what are you looking for them to do in the draft? And are you surprised that they didn't do anything in free agency?
I'm not surprised by it necessarily, but I think that if they were a team, if there's any team that could use a big move to get themselves over the hump, this is a team that if you want to get better offensively, go after someone like AJ Brown and steal him from the Patriots, or like they don't necessarily need him, but I think Max Crosby would make that defense a top defense, maybe of all time at that point, because their defense was really good last year. And you have Nick Pedino and Pat Surtain. If you want to be aggressive and you clearly have cap space, go after and make that move. But the big thing for the Broncos for me is like the receiver core has been lacking pretty much since the Super Bowl, and they haven't done anything to address it. Cortland Sutton is a good receiver, don't get me wrong, and he's proven to be a one, but outside of him, it's Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant. Go out and get a receiver in the first round, please. And then running backs, I'm concerned about J.K. Dobbins. He's coming off of a major injury. And then R.J. Harvey, I like him, but he didn't really show too much wow with me last year. I hope he can make that next leap in year two, but they got to focus on their offense. That's what they need to focus on, not their offensive line. I'm talking personnel talent. Go out and get the best receiver available. You guys are picking, let me see when they're picking this year. They're picking 30th, so they're not doing themselves any favors. With that 30th pick, get a wide receiver or get a running back, whoever is the best available. Get some offensive talent, because that's the big thing. Bo Nix comes back, let him have somebody he can throw to or hand the ball off to.
Yeah, because for this team, you hit the nail on the head there. Like, Cortland Sutton is getting older, and Cortland Sutton, he's one of those guys, he is a one, but on an ideal team, you want him as your number two. Like, the Rams won the Super Bowl with Odell Beckham Jr. as their number two option. Cooper Kupp was the number two for the Seahawks last year. Then you also had Rashid Shaheed and other players making plays there. But you definitely need talent. I would honestly go with tight end, though. I think for the Broncos, with the style that they play with Bo Nix, if you can get a difference maker at tight end, you still have players like Marvin Mims there. You still have Cortland Sutton. So if you can get someone who could be maybe someone like not Brock Bowers, but someone closer to Michael Mayer or Tucker Kraft, where they can step in and just be a solid above average tight end, make big catches for you in those short yarded situations. I think that'll help open up the short game for Bo Nix there, pick up their downs and keep drives alive. But I do think J.K. Dobbins re-signing him, that's okay, but I also would like to see them take another running back. But I do think R.J. Harvey's going to take a step forward. And then really defense, all you need is a linebacker at this point, but defense was your strength last year. So yeah, just focusing on those skill players. But I think tight end should be the priority.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think right now, looking at who's available around that time, and obviously the NFL draft, who knows, but Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt, he's a guy that should be there. He's 6'4", 240, blocking tight end, has some receiving upside. I would look at Eli Stowers potentially as a pick that could be good there. If he's still available, which I doubt he will be, Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon could be really good. But overall, a tight end would be great. I'd love to see them with a Brock Bowers like talent on that team, because I think that could be what makes their offense really pop.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone would love a Brock Bowers like talent though, but I feel like there only will be one Brock Bowers, at least in the modern NFL. But what can you do? So for the Broncos, I'm pretty optimistic. However, the only thing that concerns me about them heading into next season is how many fourth quarter comebacks they had. And typically the following year, those go the other way. You think of the Vikings, a lot of teams that had close one possession games get to the
Cheap.
playoffs, and then again against the Buffalo Bills, it's a close one possession game. You go to overtime in that one, where there's some situations where if Josh Allen has a straight head on and sees Dawson Knox wide open walking into the end zone, the Bills probably win that game. And there's a lot of what ifs with the Broncos. So typically flips going back the other way. So in the chat right now, do you think the Broncos take a step back? Do those fourth quarter woes come back to haunt them, or is that just a fallacy on my end? Let us know in the comments. Then we move on to your favorite team in this division, the Chargers. They go out
Yes.
there, they re-sign Trey Lance. That was a priority for the Chargers. Make sure we have that solid backup in Trey Lance. And then they sign Keaton Mitchell. That's a really solid pickup at running back. At fullback, they pick up Alec Ingold, Charlie Kohler at tight end. They re-sign offensive tackle Trevor Penning. They sign offensive guard Cole Strange. Solid pickup there. Tyler Bardiz. Offensive lineman Trey Pipkins re-signed. Then you also sign Tier Tart to your defensive line there. You re-sign Khalil Mack, which is a big re-sign for you. And then you also sign Delvin Tomlinson, Deion Leonard, Denzel Perryman re-signed, and then Deshaun Phillips re-signed. So you pretty much re-sign your entire linebacking core. On top of that, you re-sign Josh Harris. What a mouthful that was. Chargers got busy.
They did get busy. Keaton Mitchell, nice addition. Pair him with Kamani Vidal and Amari Hampton. Offensive line help, which they desperately need. They get two solid starting offensive linemen. Can they all stay healthy is the big question, because their offensive line going into last season was supposed to be good, but then every single person dies for them, and it just doesn't work out for them. So if Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, and all these other guys can stay healthy, I like that. My biggest concern with the Chargers going into next season is last year their defense was top 5 and 6 in the league, and they lose Jesse Minter to be a head coach for the Ravens. And just like our concerns with the Niners, I think Jesse Minter and what he did for them last year, he held the Patriots to 13 points in that playoff game, really had them struggling out there. If Justin Herbert doesn't melt down and struggle against the Patriots defense, we could be talking about a team that's facing a banged up Broncos team the next round. So I think the Chargers, their offense should be fine. I would like them to go out and get another receiver, make Quentin Johnston a third, because that's kind of what he is ultimately. And then get somebody that can pair alongside Lad McConkey. That's what I would like them to do. Will they do that? I doubt it. But right now, for the team that was 11-6, I think they're probably 10-7 next year, unless if Justin Herbert finally becomes the guy that Twitter says he is. But yeah, what are your thoughts? Chargers wise, I think that for me, I would honestly go after a receiver or bolster up the defense, because you did have some losses there.
Yeah, I'm thinking receiver right now in the first round. Then we go offensive lineman now. And the thing with losing Jesse Minter, yes, that may hurt you. The only difference is Jim Harbaugh is kind of a smash mouth defensive rah guy. So I do think your head coach still is more of a defensive minded guy, kind of that grit and grind mentality. So I don't think that'll be as big of a deal as losing Robert Saleh will be for the San Francisco 49ers. And then I like that they went out there and they were at least aggressive trying to sign multiple offensive linemen. You go out there and get an offensive guard, and then you sign a new center. And then bringing back your entire linebacking core is huge, with re-signing Delshon Phillips, Denzel Perryman, and then Deion Leonard, and then bring Khalil Mack back for 1 year. So I do think the defense will still be good, but you have to get more firepower for Justin Herbert on offense, because Justin Herbert isn't going to be one of those quarterbacks like Brady or Mahomes that can just get you there with a really good defense and some pieces on offense. This guy is going to need a top 10 defense, and he's also going to need a damn near top 10 offense to get him there. Albeit he was dealing with some terrible offensive linemen, I think this is a step in the right direction. I do think though in free agency with offensive linemen, you're really kind of taking a stab in the dark because I feel like the reason why it's so tough to sign an offensive lineman is one, I feel like this is one of the biggest units where coaching does matter a lot because you do have to operate as a unit. And also, part of that has to come with the command from your quarterback, making sure people are doing the right things, which is maybe somewhere you can point to Justin Herbert. And then also, I think players can perform better on a cohesive offensive line together. So if you still have a bad offensive line, plugging in a better player isn't necessarily going to make your offensive line great. So I do think that's going to be one area for the Chargers that they may still struggle because you did sign two new players, but is it going to fix it?
Yeah. I do think that Mike McDaniels is going to make that offense a little bit more exciting, make their offense a little bit more modern because I feel like last year their offense was kind of predictable, and in years past, that's kind of been their issue. Now that they get Mike McDaniels, is he going to be better as a coordinator? I think so. And if you can go out and get another receiver in the draft, which the Chargers, if we're going to talk about a team that historically hits on position players, um, usually they're that team. They hit on Amari and Hampton, Lad McConkey. They got the all the years past with Keenan Allen and whatnot, Mike Williams. So Chargers can hit on receivers. They have the 22nd pick, and I think that's probably the route they'll go. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how they pan out. But I do think 11-6, maybe they're 10-7 next year, but probably similar to where they were last year as far as where I would put them in just the overall AFC rankings.
Yeah, so let's say as far as the draft, you have to prioritize. You already signed a center and an offensive guard, so you can prioritize a receiver comfortably now, and then you're just looking for more defensive line help as well on defense, and then probably a few more guards to complement this team. But overall, with the Chargers, at this point, my mentality is the Chargers are going to charger until they stop charging. And at this point, I have no reason to believe that they're not going to keep doing that, even though it seems like the way they're losing isn't as bad as it was before. It's not as fluky. It's like they're having this debate
Yeah.
on Rich Eisen, where Rich Eisen's like, one of his co-hosts is like, Chargers are still going to charge. He's like, well, it's not like a 27-point blown lead. It's not those type of losses where you collapse, where you miss like a chip shot field goal at the end of the game or some weird stuff happens.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like if anybody's going to make the Chargers not Charger, it's going to be Jim Harbaugh. And I don't think the last few years with Harbaugh so far has been failures of seasons. Last year, their offensive line is ripped to shreds. That's a hard team to win at that point. Justin Herbert's had a few meltdowns in the Harbaugh era, which hasn't helped him either, which doesn't necessarily fall on Jim Harbaugh. So I think the way they're losing, it's a step in the right direction. I can't really say that losing the right way is a thing to say, but I do think that, you know, we'll see what happens with the Chiefs this next year. We'll review them next, but like, I don't think the Chargers are as pathetic and as loser mentality of they've been in years past. So I give them credit there.
Yeah,
Also,
definitely.
one last thing I'll say is like, and I'm just pulling it up because I was thinking of him. They re-signed Khalil Mack, so Khalil Mack next year when he suits up with the Chargers, his longest tenured team will now be the Chargers. Isn't that kind of weird to think about?
Yeah. Well, yeah, he was with the Raiders for a bit, and then when I think of Khalil Mack, I think of his stint with the Bears because that is when he was at his most dominant, and he dragged Mitch Trubisky and that Matt Nagy led team to 11-5, and they were a miss Cody Parkey field goal away from getting to potentially a divisional round. And with how good that defense was, like the NFL playoffs can be fluky where you have a special teams play, defensive play goes your way. Like this is a team that very well their defense could have dragged them into a conference championship, and it probably would have been pretty similar to that Saxonville team bringing Blake Bortles to a conference championship. Very different team then with Matt Nagy too.
Yeah, I think it's just weird to think like I think of Khalil Mack so much with the Bears, and to think that his longest tenured team now is with the Chargers, it just doesn't fit in my brain because I feel like the Chargers have been like the end of his career type of team, but he's actually been really good with them. He was good last year. His second year with them, he had 17 sacks. So like, I don't know,
Yeah.
Khalil Mack. We talk about aging edge rushers. He's going to be 35 this year. So I feel like he's also aged fairly gracefully. We talk about Calais Campbell. We talk about Cam Hayward. Khalil Mack is another guy who's aged pretty well in the NFL.
Do you think that has to do with less smash mouth football and more kind of we're in the pace and space era, not only just in the NBA, but in the NFL where it's a lot more spread out. So our quarterback can run. Now your quarterback, pretty much every team has a mobile quarterback. Except for a handful, and then it's less just we're running it straight down your throat all game because our quarterback averages 130 passing yards a game like it was in the 90s and the 2000s.
Yeah, I definitely think it has to do with the modern NFL. Um, People are getting the ball out really quick as well, so I think that also helps a lot for them. But I think Khalil Mack, it's going to be interesting. I think this defense is still going to be good, but I do think it's not going to be as good as it was this past year. So I think their offense will regress, but their offense will progress. So they're going to be pretty much the same team. So Chargers actually will just Charger.
Also, shout out to Khalil Mack for getting $18 million, going out there and getting his money. Not
Oh
going to
yeah,
spend it on someone else and some offensive line help. Like, I'll take it. All right.
he's worth it.
And then let's go to the Kansas City Chiefs, who just today, or I think it was yesterday, they acquired Justin Fields in a trade with the New York Jets in exchange for a 6th-round pick and a napkin. And then they signed Amari DiMarcado, Kenneth Walker, Tyquan Thornton re-signed, Travis Kelce re-signed. Then they signed defensive lineman Kyrus Tonga. They signed corner Kadir Kohu. And then they also signed safety Alo Gilman and then James Winchester. But interesting news was trading for Justin Fields. Do you think they'll turn him into a Taysom Hill-esque figure in Kansas City?
Yeah, honestly, like Justin Fields, I don't think he has many opportunities left in the NFL, but him going to KC, being the backup, and the way that his legs operate, I do think that they can use him in the right packages. And I think, honestly, a Taysom Hill role would be perfect for him if he wants to have that longevity. So the Justin Fields signing, you give up a 6th-round pick for him. He kind of replaces what Gardner Minshew was for you last year. And if he needs to fill in, we'll see what they can do. I don't think he's going to change the world. He's not going to be the Justin Fields that they drafted at 11, but it's a good signing for them. Also, Emmanuel DiMarcado, watch out for him. He was really good for the Cardinals in the limited amount of carries he got. You know that he averaged 7 yards a carry last year?
What? That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Granted, it's 44 carries, but still, in 126 career carries, he averages 6.5 yards a carry. So, talk about a guy
All right.
explosive out of the backfield. He's going to be a stud for them. I think he was good for the Cardinals in the limited amount. That's an underrated signing that we're going to think about a few months down the line and say, hey, what a signing for them. So, running back core, Kansas City Chiefs running back core, which really hasn't been a strength for them since Jamal Charles. Love that signing for them.
Yeah, and I'm looking at them too, and all right, they need a running back. They like their weakness coming into the offseason's running back that we have marked down here. And like, okay, you signed DeMarcado and then you signed the Super Bowl MVP in Kenneth Walker, and you only had to pay him $28 million guaranteed. For someone like Kenneth Walker and the Kansas City Chiefs, you already take care of that, and then you flip Trent McDuffie into a 1st-round pick. He's an older player, he's kind of on his way out, where you kind of need more affordable players on your team right now. You need a pass rusher, and most notably, you need to get a wide receiver in the draft. And now you have 2 first-round picks for the Kansas City Chiefs. And you can go out there, get your edge rusher, and then go out there and then get Chris Tyson at wide receiver as well. So it's like you take a look at the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to be able to get their edge rusher. They're going to be able to get their wide receiver. And then they also went out there and signed 2 running backs. So they already filled one hole that they don't need to focus on in the draft at all. Maybe take a player in the 5th or 6th round. But outside of that, you're drafting for depth on defense after you get your edge rusher and your wide receiver and maybe some extra players on the offensive line. But the Kansas City Chiefs have had about as perfect an offseason that you could have had. I would have liked to see them pay Travis Kelce less money. I think the fact that he's going to be getting married to Taylor Swift, he could take a page out of Brady's playbook and maybe not get $12 million guaranteed, maybe do like 8, then you give up $4 million for the Chiefs. But who am I to judge?
Yeah, and it's probably his last year, so whatever. No big deal. But if the Kansas City Chiefs want to win the offseason, if they get Jordan Tyson with the 9th overall pick, and then with that next pick, which I believe is the 28th pick, they go out and get their corner, maybe the Colton Hood of the world, maybe Gerard McCoy out of Tennessee, then this team is going to make it back to the Super Bowl next year, 100%. Mahomes comes back pissed off after everyone said they sucked and their dynasty's over. You get the Super Bowl MVP. You get your second receiver to pair alongside Rashid Rice. Travis Kelce, he's fine there. Maybe they get another tight end to replace him eventually. Their offensive line, I think, is still fine. And then defensively, this is kind of what kept them in a lot of games this past year. Despite their struggling offense, was their defense. Sure, they lose Trent McDuffie, but they've been good at drafting the last several years. So I think right now, if there's any team that's going to have the biggest uptick next year, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. Nobody should be thinking less of the Chiefs this year than the previous years. You get better offensively already, and you have a draft with 2 first-round picks. Yeah, the Chiefs, I think, are making it back to the Super Bowl next year.
Yeah, I don't think there's really anyone in the AFC that could challenge them. The Bills will always be there, but you can't comfortably say that the Buffalo Bills are going to do it. Your toughest challenge might come within your division with the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton because he's actually a coach who can go wit for wit with Andy Reid. And then outside of that, the Patriots, I don't think the Patriots last year would have any shot versus Patrick Mahomes if he's playing like himself and has someone like Tyson on his team out of the draft here. So I do think the Chiefs, if they're able to get their wide receiver in the draft, should be heading back to the Super Bowl. But they also have the Raiders in their division, which they need to worry about. The trade fell through for Max Crosby, so that's kind of up in the air. But they signed Connor Hayward at running back, signed Jalen Naylor at wide receiver, just a solid player. And then you get Tyler Lindenbaum at center, and then you re-sign Malcolm Kuntz at edge. You sign Kwity Paye, Nakobe Dean, and Quay Walker. And then you also sign trade for Terrion Johnson from the Buffalo Bills and re-sign Eric Stokes. So get some really good talent on defense, which is much needed because you need to be able to focus on your offensive line in the draft. And then you're also going to get your quarterback. You're probably a shoe-in to take Mendoza. You also have a new coach this year in Clint Kubiak, who was the Super Bowl coach for the Seattle Seahawks. So definitely some big moves for the Raiders, and I'm feeling pretty good about their offseason so far. I love what they did on defense.
Yeah, I did too. And honestly, like you have the first overall pick, so you're going to get your quarterback. Maybe they go ahead and get a receiver as well. But outside of that, their defense looks a lot better. That should be a nice pairing. They got their head coach figured out, so that's going to be good for them. So overall, I mean, a team that desperately needed a facelift, they look like the rebuild is actually doing pretty well. If we're talking about a team that's won the offseason, I feel like the Raiders are in that conversation with how much money they've shelled out. If they keep Max Crosby, I think this defense could be a top 12 defense in the league. And then with offense, like you still have Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers alongside Mendoza. We'll see how good Mendoza is, but the one signing that I hope they do end up making is just get him a veteran quarterback alongside him. There's a bunch of them available, whether it's Jimmy G, whether it's Kirk Cousins, whether it's Carson Wentz, but get him a veteran guy that can pair alongside him. Maybe you get someone like a Andy Dalton if he's available, Joe Flacco, but somebody like that. That's the only thing. That's my only wish is if they can get somebody to back up Mendoza that has that veteran leadership.
Yeah, no, definitely need to get a veteran there for him. Find a personality fit. But I would say, like, you signed every position pretty much outside of offensive line where you had a hole defense. You got more linebacker depth and depth on your offensive line. So in the draft, I'd really just say outside of Mendoza, you're probably just looking to beef up that offensive line. Then you're going after a corner and a receiver later in the draft. Maybe you think about just trading for a receiver if someone's not willing to pay someone next year.
Yeah, I think there's even enough receiver talent right now. Like, you want to go out and get Juwan Jennings, that should help you. You want to go out and get, like, I don't think he would go here, but Tyreek Hill maybe goes there. Keenan Allen, if he wants to betray the Chargers, he can go there. But DeAndre Hopkins maybe. But go out and get somebody of a veteran status for them, and then draft a wide receiver. Then I think this team, maybe they're not in the playoffs yet, but I think like a 5 or 6 win team, but plays competitively is all you really need for the Raiders.
Yeah, it's really all you need, and they're already on the right path to rebuilding right now. At the end of the day, it is the Raiders, so will Mendoza be everything that he's set out to be in the draft? We've seen players hyped up before, so really need to just see it to believe it now. And then we have Clint Kubiak, probably have one of the best tight end duos in the league with Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers. Can he fix Ashton Jinty and then get the offensive line right is really going to be the big question. But definitely in the draft, going for Mendoza, offensive line, and then you have to get more depth at corner as well. So that is the NFC and the AFC West. For the AFC West, it's a little bit tricky because the Chargers and Broncos and Chiefs are kind of always lumped as the 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's tough for the Chargers to really take a step forward. It's also tough for them to take a step back, similarly for the Broncos. So, is there a team that stands out that is going to take a major step back next year? Do you?
I think it's the Broncos. I mean, like you mentioned, they had so many one possession wins. I think they had 8 one possession wins this past year. They had some ugly games against the Jets. They had some ugly wins. So if they did half of that this next year, that's already 4 wins off their schedule. They are going to have a first place schedule as well. The offense, it really depends on what they do in the draft, but their offense has not excited me at all. So honestly, I think it's going to be the Broncos. Instead of 14-3, maybe they're 8-9, 9-8, which is what we thought they were going to be.
They had 11 one possession wins last year.
11. So if they have half, they're going to have 8 wins, 9 wins, which is still a good team, but their defense is solid. Their offense is, I would say, fairly below average as far as offensive talent is concerned. So, yeah, I think for sure the Broncos are the most viable to take a step back, and maybe they're 9-8, maybe they're 10-7, but either way, they should have the most win regression.
And they also had 4 wins occurring after trailing by at least 8 points as well.
Yeah, and if you look at like the Bears win, the Jets
The
win was
Eagles.
hideous in London. The Eagles, like they have so many examples of wins that occurred that probably don't go their way any other given year. So they're the most due for a regression. Not even because they're a bad team, just because of NFL fates. We've seen that plenty times before.
Also, Bo's ankle, too. That's a little bit of a concern for me. The fact that him and Sean Payton had a little bit of beef, and there's some miscommunication there.
Yeah, that too. And like Bo Nix is solid, but I don't think he's gonna bring them to the promised land there. So I think 9-8, 8-9 is probably what we'll see from them.
All right. Well, that is both West. So for those of you watching right now, let us know in the chat, who do you think is going to take the biggest step back in the AFC and NFC West, and who do you think a surprise team is going to be? Who do you think is going to win the division? How do you feel about their offseason? Let us know all of your thoughts in the chat below. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button as well as we continue through this, and we continue through the NFL. We just gave you an hour and a half of some of the best NFL content you'll see, talking about every single team in the league. That's right, all 32 teams. And as far as NBA news, they're voting on an expansion in the next few weeks here. They're thinking about adding, wow, what a transition. They're thinking about adding 2 teams in Las Vegas, and then they're also thinking about adding a team in Seattle. And you better think about, I don't know, moving the Memphis Grizzlies to Nashville as well. I mean, just do it. You already have a stadium there. No one wants to go to Memphis unless it's for the Bass Pro Shops pyramid.
Yeah, so they're gonna probably bring back the Supersonics, which is awesome. I think that's cool. And then Vegas, which I think apparently just every major sports entity is just going to move to Vegas, which I suppose. Honestly, we had talked about it off here, but the Clippers, I think they're a perfect team that could just go to Vegas. Nobody cares about the Clippers in LA, so get them out of there. But I don't honestly like the expansion's cool and all, but yet again, you have a league where we already have 10 teams that are already out of contention halfway through the season, and you're going to add two more teams to be at the bottom with them. I just don't know. Expansion wise, I get it, but at the same time, I just don't think it's going to make the product that much better either. So that's my main concern. The locations are fine. I think that's cool. Seattle definitely deserves a team again. Vegas, that's going to be exciting, but I don't know if this is going to make the NBA better.
Yeah, so right now the details are target cities, as mentioned before, are going to be Las Vegas and Seattle. The approval threshold for this vote, I know some of you are asking, is going to be for the motion to pass, a 3/4 majority is required, meaning at least 23 of the 30 governors must vote in favor of it. And I also have questions like, does adding 2 new NBA teams automatically increase your revenue, or how does the revenue sharing work with the other 30 teams? Because if the NBA is still making the same amount of money, are the owners going to lose money, or do you think that's kind of a nothing? I'm thinking too much about it.
I think they'll make more money just based on ticket sales and just having another market because they're going to have to do like an expansion fee as well. I think the owner will have to shell out probably like $1 billion. That'll go to the other owners. So I think in the end, it'll probably be a wash for them.
Okay. And then the primary objective, you ask. Well, this initial vote is to authorize the league to begin formal bidding and purchase process for the 2 markets. A potential final vote officially uh, award the franchise expected later in 2026. And then the target launch would be to begin play in the 2028-2029 season. The estimated expansion fee is also set to be about $10 billion. And then
10. Jesus
$10 billion, and the fees would be split among the 30 owners, which would be approximately 300 million per team. Adding 2 Western teams would likely force Minnesota or Memphis or New Orleans into the Eastern Conference, which could be interesting to see Anthony Edwards in the East. To be honest, that'd probably be his best shot at making the finals. And then the expansion of the draft would likely occur in 2027, where existing teams can protect 8 players.
Interesting. Okay. I think I like Seattle a lot. Seattle, it's going to be exciting. I think that's going to be it's bringing the Supersonics back. That's going to be good for basketball. Vegas, I think, fits perfectly. I think they're going to love having the NBA there. And they already have a stadium that they could use. If they want to just use the stadium that the Golden Knights use, they don't even need to buy a new stadium, although they'll probably just get one anyways. So I like it there. As far as locations, I think they nailed it. As far as how this will span out, typically these expansion teams are not going to be very good right away. And if you're protecting 8 players, I don't think they're going to be getting like the ninth best player on any given team. So I don't know. Yet again, we always like more basketball. So I think
Yeah.
overall I'm okay with it, but I'm not overly. I'm kind of lukewarm on this expansion idea.
Yeah, and Seattle, I mean, they already had a team. Their population, though, is over 4 million people, so you have a good amount of people there to go to games. I mean, you have some teams in smaller cities like Salt Lake, for example, Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City can't even get their fans to show up for a victory parade. The only thing I would be concerned about is it mentioned the teams that would be forced to go into the Eastern Conference would be the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, or the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Grizzlies and the Pelicans cannot go to the East because the East right now has too many teams at the bottom of the conference that are just bad. And the, I guess, discrepancy in talent in the East has always been really bad. And I feel like the Grizzlies probably have been the most consistent out of those teams. Just when I've been watching the NBA, but I think Minnesota in the East with Anthony Edwards would be a really interesting proposition because then we could potentially get like a Celtics Timberwolves matchup where right now the East is a little bit open. So if you add another contender like the Timberwolves in, and then the West just always has new and upcoming teams where there's not going to really be a way through Wembenyama or the Oklahoma City Thunder foreseeably through the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think for the Timberwolves, that'd be the most exciting for the NBA because if you put the Timberwolves in there right now, they're the 4 seed. Right now, they're the 6 seed and competing. Right now, they could be competitive for the play-in tournament. You put them in the East, they are probably the second or third best team in the East right now, outside of the Celtics and maybe Pistons, if you want to throw the Knicks in there, I guess. But you put the Timberwolves in there. As far as like location wise, who is the most eastern of those teams? I feel like it's the Grizzlies. Am I wrong there? Maybe it's New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean the Grizzlies makes the most sense. They're closer to the east, but like Milwaukee is also in the east, and like Wisconsin's pretty far up there. Detroit is also there, and then you have Milwaukee, Detroit, and then you have Toronto, and then you put Minnesota. Minnesota's also basically Canada, so I would say probably Memphis and Minnesota should go to the East because Utah or New Orleans is still pretty far south, where you have all the Texas teams and the Oklahoma City Thunder around them, and then you look at the East right now, and there are 3 teams that have not gotten to 20 wins yet. Not great. Nets, Washington Wizards, and Pacers all have 17, 16, and 15 wins, where only the Sacramento Kings have not won 20 games. And then you look at the other teams who are down in the West. It is the Mavericks, who have Cooper Flag. They'll be better. The Jazz, who traded for Triple J. They have Laurie Markkinen, some talent. And then, like, the Pelicans are really the only team that are kind of dead over the next few years outside of those few teams. And then the Grizzlies with what they want to do with Ja Morant.
Yeah, that is an interesting proposition. I am curious, like, if they're going to move it to 32 teams, does that mean they're going to have 4 divisions in each conference? Because at this point, you would have 16 teams per conference, and right now you have 3 divisions. So you're going to probably have to split up the conferences also as well, like who's in each division. I feel like you're going to have to keep like Golden State, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Suns, probably all in the same division together. And then Southwest, it's probably going to still be Dallas, Houston, Memphis, San Antonio. Maybe New Orleans gets the end of the stick there, but I'm just curious like how they're going to reshuffle the divisions if they move forward there. And I feel like for like the East, it's probably you're gonna have to keep the Celtics with the Knicks, Sixers, and Nets probably, maybe Toronto, but the reshuffling is going to be the biggest mystery to me. Who's going to go where?
Yeah, that's the most interesting proposition is potentially having Anthony Edwards in the East if he is still on the Timberwolves to see that through. But I mean, if I'm an owner and I'm looking up the fees that they would split, 300 million per team, like I don't know about that. Especially if I'm an older owner and I'm about to sell my team, maybe I want to keep my money for a little bit. Like I don't know if I want to, and you need 23 out of 30 teams to vote on it.
I don't know if it's going to pass. Honestly, I'm going to be interested to see how this pans out. But the reshuffling there, I can't say like the most recent expansion for them. I believe they brought the Hornets and another team there. I'll have to look it up, but um, I know the most recent expansion in the 4 major sports was in hockey because they brought the Kraken and the Golden Knights. The Golden Knights have been extremely successful there. They've been incredible with that. The
In
last
Vegas.
expansion they had was the Hornets, or I'm sorry, the Bobcats in 2004. That hasn't really panned out too well for them. Um, Bobcats are now the Hornets, and the Hornets kind of rediscovered themselves there after they moved to New Orleans. But I just don't know. The last expansion wasn't overly successful for them, and outside of that, it was like the Miami Heat as well. But I don't. The NBA, it's the most of all the teams, of all the sports that can expand. I don't know if the NBA is growing like we think it is. I think if anything, it seems like it's hit a bit of a lull, at least over the last few years. But maybe we're wrong there.
Yeah, I do think there has been an infusion of talent coming in. And the interesting thing for a Seattle team would be it's going to be the Seattle Kraken's ownership group. And I believe that they have been successful over the past few years.
Yeah,
Did they get to a Stanley Cup, or am I imagining that?
you're thinking of the Golden Knights. They've made it to
The Golden
two and they've
Knights.
won one.
Okay.
But the
I
Kraken
do
are in the
think,
playoff contention, so they're still good.
yeah, so they're still good, so they'll be competitive. I really think it is the owners that you have in the league that matters the most. But I feel like the NBA hit a lull kind of during the LeBron era, and it was in between the LeBron era and then Steph Curry. And after Kevin Durant left the Warriors, I felt like the NBA was in shambles a little bit, where you had the Raptors win, and then ever since 2019, we have not had a back-to-back NBA champion. But I am seeing more talent come into the NBA, which brings us to our next segment, which is going to be about just the NBA draft. And we're going to go from comparing 2014 on to 2019 to 2020 to 2025. And we're going to compare the first overall picks from each of those drafts and then kind of give us our thoughts, because I do think there can be a specific lull pointed at the draft where you look at like 2019, 2018, 2017, there hasn't been as much talent, there hasn't been as many surefire picks in the 2000s as I feel like the 2020 picks. There's been much better, much more consistent. And you looked at Victor Wembanyama, probably the most generational, can't miss talents as far as number one picks. And I think Victor Wembanyama in 2023 is probably the best number one overall pick since Dwight Howard. I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, I can say that. Yeah, because honestly, after that, we haven't had an MVP since Derrick Rose, which was 2008. And some of these
Wait,
other
what?
drafts, Derrick Rose was 2008.
That was the last pick in the NBA that was an MVP as far as a number one overall pick.
Yeah, because 2009 we had Blake Griffin. He didn't win an MVP. John Wall, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, Anthony Bennett, Andrew Wiggins, Carl Anthony Towns, Ben Simmons, Markel Fultz, DeAndre Ayton. Yeah, the list goes on. I mean, and then I think ultimately we're going to see Wemby win one, so he's going to break that curse. But the fact that it's been almost 20 years since the MVP has been the first overall pick, it's just outlandish. But for those who maybe don't know the top pick from 2014 to 2019, we had Andrew Wiggins in 2014, who I don't know if I can call him a bust. I feel like a bust is kind of a strong word, but he is in the same draft as Joel Embiid. You have the Julius Randles of the world, the Zach Levines of the world. We have Joseph Nurkic in there, Clint Capella, who DeAndre Ayton doesn't like to be compared to. But Andrew Wiggins, kind of an underwhelming first overall pick to start out.
Yeah,
And
he's
then
a little bit overwhelming, and I think it was like he had so much athleticism in college that that was really the potential that he had, where people thought he was going to step up and be one of the best players in the NBA. And it's kind of just been, I feel like, the media whiffing on a lot of the people that they've hyped up. Like, but with Andrew Wiggins, I can't say he's necessarily a bust because he is an NBA champion, but I don't think he can really compare to any of the picks in the 2020s outside of maybe Zachary Reicher.
yeah, I would agree. And I don't know. He's a one-time All-Star. That usually points to somewhat of a bust. But he's averaged 18 points a game. He shot about 45% from the field. He's won a championship. So for that, I can't say he's a bust. Plus, I believe he was Rookie of the Year as well. 2015, we have Carl Anthony Towns, who he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, but
I
I
hope
think that
not.
speaks more to the I think that speaks more to the Hall of Fame than it does to him being a Hall of Fame player. But that draft, it's him, D'Angelo Russell at number 2, who I kind of want to call a bust a little bit, but maybe just kind of underwhelming. And then Jahlil Okafor. But the rest of that draft, it's Devin Booker, Gambling Man, Terry Rozier, and that's kind of it. The 2015 draft's pretty underwhelming. Um, you have some like Miles Turners of the world who are good players, but really like the best player in this draft is probably it's Karl Anthony Towns and like Devin Booker for that draft.
Yeah, and I think some of the criteria for a bust has to be if you took someone else in this draft, would your team be radically different? And as much as I like Devin Booker, I can't say I'm in love with him. I don't necessarily think that the Timberwolves get to a finals with Devin Booker if you swap him out with Karl Anthony Towns. Do you still make the Jimmy Butler trade and pair him with Devin Booker? You also already had Andrew Wiggins on that team. So I do think like the fact that you already had Wiggins, I believe that was close to the era where you're bringing in Jimmy Butler as well. Is it going to radically change your franchise? No. So I think he's just a benefactor of being in a weak draft, but I do think he's underperformed to expectations.
Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah, he
It's
has
hard to
more
say because
talent.
like he's more talented than what his stats say, but 20 points a game. He's averaged a double double. He's a 6-time All Star, 3-time All NBA. He's on a good Knicks team. They did make the finals. So like I can't call him a bust because I still think like if we're thinking about best centers of our generation, he's probably not number 1, 2, or 3, but he's still in like the top 5 centers of our era, most likely, or at least big man. You gotta mention him. But again, like he is somebody who's super tall, super athletic, has the capability, can shoot threes, but I still find him to be a little overrated.
Yeah, that's my frustration with him is he has all of that talent. He has the talent to be Giannis with shooting, and then his signature move isn't going to be a charge either, which is kind of Giannis's weak point in his game where he can't shoot. But Karl Anthony Towns is someone who should be dominating, and you know the fact with Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins being back-to-back number 1 picks, what do they both have in common? Is they were both bullied by Jimmy Butler, and he beat both of them with the backups in Minnesota. Like he was clearly focusing all of that. You guys are soft. His frustration in that practice when he beat them with the backups, that was clearly aimed at Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins.
100%. And they've struggled with work ethic as well, at least based on reports from the NBA. So I don't love it either. 2016, this is probably the most cursed draft because the number 1 overall pick is Ben Simmons. And if this story ends in 2019, Ben Simmons is probably not a bust. He's a 3-time All Star at this point, 4th in Defensive Player of the Year at one point, All Defensive Player. And then the injury occurs. He refuses to do a layup in Philadelphia. And now he's on a league minimum contract with the Clippers right now, who are not a great team either. So Ben Simmons is number 1. And then later in this draft, you have Brandon Ingram, Jaylen Brown,
At
who is
number
averaging
3.
30 points this year, going
Pretty
ballistic.
good.
You
Finals
also,
MVP. Not
yeah,
bad.
you have Jamal Murray, who's been good for you. Demonte Sabonis has
Marcus
been
Smart.
a consistent All Star. Marcus, we have Buddy Hield as well. So 2016, kind of an interesting draft, but if Philly picked Jaylen Brown, they probably make a finals.
Potentially, even if they don't, even like Jaylen Brown aside, the fact that there are NBA players that perform in the league today above expectations of what they had in the draft is a reason why Ben Simmons is a bust. But like the criteria for being a bust as the number 1 overall pick is just players that are taken behind you who are more generational talent in a combination with you underperforming. So not only did Ben Simmons underperform, you can rattle off like 6 guys off the top of your head, like Jaylen Brown, Brandon Ingram, say what you will about him, but he still played well. And then you also have, I believe, who else was in this draft that was good? You Buddy
We
Hield,
have
who was
Buddy
also
Hield,
really good. Yeah.
Jamal Murray, who
Jamal
was the
Murray,
sidekick for Joker.
another NBA champion, Jamal Murray.
Yep. Yep. You also have DeMonte Sabonis, who has been successful for them. Let's see who else we're missing here. Pascal Siakam later in this
Oh,
draft is
good hit.
absolute
What pick was
stud.
Siak?
And then Siakam was 27th.
Sleeper hit.
Underrated pick for them. But 2016, yeah, I would definitely say Ben Simmons was a bust. And then we go to 20. Any
I'm
last
looking
things on
at
2016?
2013 and 2014. Like the Cavaliers took Anthony Bennett and Andrew Wiggins back to back, but the 76ers said, I'll do you one better and I'll take Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz back to back. Like Anthony Bennett was ran out of the league immediately, but Ben Simmons is kind of back. Markelle Fultz bounced back a little bit, but Andrew Wiggins is probably the best pro out of them. But like you have within a 6-year span, 2 teams get the #1 overall pick and do nothing.
And not only that, but 2 teams that at one point are favorites in the Eastern Conference. Because the Sixers had Simmons and Embiid, Butler, and Tobias Harris. If they hit on these 2 picks, they're probably talking about a totally different team. We could be talking about a Sixers dynasty because you could have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Instead, you give it to your fierce rivals. In Cleveland, you have LeBron, which I know one of those picks ends up being Kevin Love. But if they could have hit on Anthony Bennett, which I know that draft is historically awful, but God forbid they hit on the right pick there and they're good. Maybe the Cavs win 2 of those Warriors bouts together. But it's just insane that 2 teams that historically have underwhelmed were the teams that were at the pillar of excellence at that time, and they fizzle out and they do nothing, especially with the trust the process.
Yeah, especially with the trust the process there. And then after that, you have DeAndre Ayton, and the reason why DeAndre Ayton is a massive bust. First of all, Stephen A. Smith said if you take Luka over Ayton, you're racist. Funny coming from the guy who said Shohei Ohtani couldn't be the face of baseball because he didn't speak English. But what do I know? But you have Luka, and then you also have Trae Young, who's taken behind him. Both pretty good players. Trae Young been to a Eastern Conference Finals as the best player on the team. I know DeAndre Ayton's been to a Finals, and then Luka Doncic also been to a Western Conference Final and an NBA Finals as the best player on his team. If you think he was better than Kyrie in that run here. So not only do you take DeAndre Ayton #1, you have a generational talent in Luka Doncic.
Yeah, he's been a bust. Not only that, in that same draft, so you have DeAndre Ayton, who now is on his 4th team at this point, and the Lakers fans despise him. DeAndre Ayton, really, it was just Chris Paul that could get the most out of him. Otherwise, he's been a big disappointment. Trae Young has been better for you. Luka Doncic is a top 10 player in the league. And then SGA, who just won a title and just broke Wilt's record for most 20-point games in a row. He was in that same draft. So if we're talking about an obvious bust, DeAndre Ayton is obviously a bust in this mix. I do want to quickly shout out one last thing with 2017. Markelle Fultz obviously bust. Jason Tatum's probably the best in this draft, but they also have the greatest scorer of all time in this draft as well. Bam Adebayo, 14th overall.
Bam! Bam! Back-to-back drafts. You have, so in 2016, you have Finals MVP Jaylen Brown. Then 2017, you have the greatest scorer of all time in a game that was actually filmed and not a myth that was made up by senile boomers. And then you also have Jason Tatum in that draft. And then the year after that, you have SGA, Finals MVP, and all-time 20-point plus scorer in a row, potentially back-to-back MVP.
You have 2 of the greatest scorers to ever do it.
You could have paired SGA with Devin Booker. Oh my God. Ugh.
But instead they took Mikal Bridges and traded him for Kevin Durant. What could have been?
That's a team. SGA and Devin Booker. Like they already had Devin Booker and the #1 pick.
Yeah. They could have even had Luka on him. Even Luka. Luka was closer. But SGA could have had him. That could have been great. But DeAndre Ayton, what a bum. And then 2019, was Zion's
Zion.
draft. This is a draft that I don't know if any of the top 3 picks are hits. I mean,
They all
Zion,
suck.
yeah, like Zion, dead in New Orleans, hasn't done anything. It was only a 2-time All-Star, hasn't played pretty much at all the last 3 years.
Like
John
RJ
Morant
Barrett too.
loves. John Morant is the face of the NRA at this point, and then RJ Barrett, who's just kind of playing around in Toronto.
Yeah. Would you still take Ja number 1 overall out of those
I
players? Is there
guess.
anyone else in this
Yeah,
draft that you can find that you would take over any of those guys?
you got Kobe White, who's been playing well. Roy Hachimura is in this draft.
Oh yeah.
We have Jordan Poole, Ty Jerome. We love Ty Jerome on this show.
Yo,
Um,
Ty Jerome,
all these,
6th man of the year candidate.
yeah, Ty Jerome, an absolute stud. But the leader in win shares for this team is in this draft is Daniel Gafford. He is the leader in win shares in the 2019 draft, and then Nick Claxton is second, and then it's Zion, and then like Darius Garland, he can get a shout out. But honestly, this 2019 draft has not aged very well at all.
Yeah, that one sucks. I mean, you look at the other ones, Luca in 2018, Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, 16, 17. Yeah, that one's pretty bad, but I feel like the Cat draft, you don't have too much talent. The Wiggins draft, you don't see too much, but like once you hit like 17, 18, you have some talent come back in. But then like 2019 again, there's like a huge drop off in talent. And so, like, leading up to the 2020s, outside of from like 2014 up until 2019, there's probably only 2 number 1 picks that you would keep the same in Carl Anthony, maybe only one with Carl Anthony Towns still being the best player in his draft, but it's a coin flip because you still have Devin Booker there. And I think I would rather take Devin Booker. So I don't think there's a single number 1 pick that you would keep the same because Andrew Wiggins was the same draft as Joel Embiid.
Yeah, so I would definitely take Joel Embiid. And if we continue it to 2013, it goes even longer because 2013 it's Giannis who's better than what Anthony or really anybody for Anthony Bennett. So
Kelly
like
Olynyk.
2013 to 2019, not a single player on that draft that we take over any other person. So not a great stretch of time for them at this point. Where like 2012 it's Kyrie, 2011 it's I believe Anthony Davis, and then 2010 is John Wall. So like we had a little bit of success there, but from 2013 to 2019, there's a lot of misses there.
Yeah, it was 2013 Anthony Bennett. Then it goes Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, John Wall, Blake Griffin, Derrick Rose. So that's a pretty good stretch. And then, yeah, so the only number 1 pick we'd keep the same.
It's Cap.
Honestly, none of them. I would rather have Devin Booker. None of them. None of these number 1 picks are the best player in the draft. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would agree.
But then we move on to the 2020s. In the 2020 draft, Anthony Edwards to start kind of the new generation of stars coming into the league. And now we hit a stretch in 6 out of these 5 picks, I think, are the best player in the draft. And I don't think there's anyone I would take over them because 2020, we have Anthony Edwards. Anyone else in that draft you're taking over Ant-Man?
There's nobody I'm taking over Ant-Man, but I would shout out Tyrese Halliburton and LaMelo Ball. Those guys are great players. I do like Halliburton a lot, but Anthony Edwards is definitely better than the other two. Although Halliburton, I think there could be a discussion there just from what he's done already. But that's the only person I'm maybe shouting out in that regard.
Yeah, I think you can actually make a basketball case that Tyrese Halliburton maybe leads to more success in the playoffs, especially with his style of basketball. He doesn't necessarily need to score the most. It's the way he runs the offense. And then some of the clutch shots that he was hitting in the playoffs in their finals run last year. Like, this is a guy who's already been to the NBA finals, albeit Jason Tatum tore his Achilles last year and he got to face the Knicks after they were pretty burnt out. But I do think you can make a case for Halliburton, but I think most people still would take Anthony Edwards number 1.
I would agree. Yeah, I would still take Ant number 1.
And then the year after that, in 2021, we have Cade Cunningham, number one seed in the East right now. I think they've only lost 14 games. 19 now. Okay, so they dropped a couple games, but they're still the number one seed. They were one of the 340 before 20 teams this year. So they're one of 3 teams that has a 90% chance of winning the finals because that's the win rate of finals teams who hit the 40-20 rule by Phil Jackson.
Yeah, and I love Cade Cunningham. I think the Pistons, outside of the Celtics, they're probably the best team in the East right now. And he went to a team that had nothing. So the way that they've been able to go up, I love Cade Cunningham a lot. The only other players I would shout out in this draft that you can maybe mention him is Evan Mobley, because Evan Mobley's been great for the Cavs. And then
Yeah.
Alfred Sengun for the Rockets. But outside of that, I don't think there's anybody who I would contest against Cade Cunningham otherwise.
Yeah, Mobley's barely a 2 on the Cavs, and Şengün doesn't play defense. So, like, Cade's a two-way player. And
And Cade
Cade is
Cunningham's a
also
stud.
number 2 in assists. He's one of 2 players averaging 10-plus assists this year.
Yeah. And the way that Pistons team, we're talking about the team that had the longest losing streak ever. And then just 1 year later is in the playoffs going 7 games against the Knicks, who end up making the finals. Incredible. And then what they're doing this year, they could win the finals, and they would fit into that 40-20 rule. So I'm not taking anybody outside of Cunningham.
And then we have Paolo Banchero, who is kind of Karl Anthony Towns, but a little less talented, but he has less zest. Taken number 1 overall in 2022. Pretty much averaging 22 points a game since he came into the league. Magic have been to the playoffs twice. One of those, he got swept by the Boston Celtics. And then the other one, he went 7 with the Cleveland Cavaliers in a really competitive series. But Paolo overall has been a really good player. Is there anyone that jumps out you would take over him? Because I feel like he's been a really solid star in the league, but maybe he's not as good as Cade or Anthony Edwards. Definitely the weakest one so far.
I think you could shout out Chet Holmgren right here. Any other player, they're either drafted too later in the draft. Like Jalen Williams is in this draft. You have Jalen Duran. But then other than that, like every other player, they're not better than Paulo. But so really, it's Chet Holmgren that you can argue, and he was taken second. So should the Magic have taken Chet over Paulo Banchero? I don't know. I think they're both kind of the same type of player. I mean, obviously Chet's a champion, but I feel like Paulo's a better player overall.
I think Chet fits really well on the Thunder. He's a really good player in the NBA, but as far as a player for the Magic to build around, and when I think of a number 1 overall pick, it's definitely more Paolo, and Paolo just has more of that it factor, I feel like, who can just be the alpha on a team, even though he might not be the best player on a championship team. I still think he'll have a really successful career. So I do think that is the right move, especially thinking about Chet Holmgren down the line, some of the injury concerns he could have. So another one, and there's only one pick from 2014 to 2019 that we would have kept the same, except maybe the Zion Williamson draft. That's just because it's so terrible. And then after that, Victor Wembanyama, potentially the future GOAT of the NBA, I don't know, was taken in 2023. And you mentioned before, it has been since 2008 that we have had a number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft win MVP. The last person to do it was Derrick Rose. And now Wemby is poised to potentially be a MVP candidate this year. He's top 3 in the discussion. I think he should definitely be in the conversation, but he should win an MVP at some point, and he's probably going to win MVP and Defensive Player of the Year when he does it, because you look at him right now, he's averaging 3 blocks a game. The closest person's 1.9. He's like averaging close to double the amount in blocks per games. He led the league in blocks last year, and he missed the season after February, which is insane. And then Yeah, all around, there's nothing he can't do. His ball skills are really good. He can play in a two big lineup with Luke Cornett, and he's still facilitating. So I think like Wemby, like this is the LeBron. But like in the 2000s, you have Anthony Davis and you have Kyrie Irving. But like I think Wemby is better than both of those guys, and you really just drafted the next face of the league.
Yeah, he's a unicorn. Victor Wembanyama, absolutely. There's not even anybody even close in this draft that even deserves a mention. He's by far he's the best player taken since LeBron, probably. I mean, I think that's fair to say. So, yeah, this is a guy that comes around once in a generation. Obvious number one pick.
Yeah, obvious number one pick. And then 2024, a little bit of a weaker draft though. You have Zachary Reicher, I believe, and he's only averaging about 22 minutes a game for the Atlanta Hawks and about 9 points. So this is really the only bust so far in the 2020s, and he's the only person we would replace. I wouldn't necessarily say he's a bust, but like for a number one overall pick, is there anyone else we could have got?
Honestly, it's kind of in one of those scenarios where it's too early to tell. But if we look at players surrounding him, um,
Stephon
Alex
Castle.
Sarr was this. Yeah, like Alex Sarr was the second overall pick. Stephen Castle's probably the one you could shout out. Zach
He had
Edey
a
was the ninth overall pick.
Castle just had a 30
But
point
it's
triple
kind of too
double.
early to tell with a lot of these guys. Yeah, Castle's been nice. He's averaging 15 and 5 in his career so far. He has more win shares. Right now, the leader in win shares for them is for this draft so far is Donovan Clinnigan
Who?
for Portland. Yeah,
Okay.
this draft we're only 2 years in, so like maybe more time will tell. But so far, Zachary Ricochet, he was an all rookie last year. He shoots not a very good 3-point shooter, average
His
defensively. Yeah,
percentage went down. Like, I think it was last time we were talking about it, his free throw percentage dropped to below 70% from his rookie year to this year.
he's shooting 60% from the free throw line right now.
That's not
And he's
good.
a small forward. He's not a great 3-point shooter. He shoots 35% from the field. Yeah, and his shooting field goal range has dropped from 46% to 44. So, I don't think he's going to pan out. I don't know if maybe that changes over time, but based on his projection, he's probably a bust.
And then after that, Cooper Flag was taken. But there's a real conversation because there were some fine whites taken in this draft in Cooper Flag. And then you also have Con Canepo, who, as a rookie, just casually leading the NBA in three pointers made with 268 so far. He's on pace to break Ray Allen's 3 point record in his rookie year. And then you have Cooper Flag, who is putting on a highlight reel with the Dallas Mavericks. He's been someone who's also been balling out and looks like a generational talent. So between those two players, and then you also have Dylan Harper, who's on the Spurs, who I saw play last Tuesday night. A very solid player for them. He's come in the past few weeks, and his shooting has really come on, where he's consistently been able to come off the bench and put up over 15 points. So, like, this draft is really good this year.
Yeah, and now even VJ Edgecombe for the Sixers. Sixers
Yeah.
have had a lot of injuries. He's been good for them. Those are the first four picks, and you have the guy who's gonna. If this was 2008, he has the all-time 3-point single season record. Con Canuple, Cooper Flag. After everything that's happened in Dallas, he's been a star for them so far. I believe he dropped 50 points earlier this season. Dylan Harper, he's going to pair along nicely with Victor Wembanyama. And VJ Edgecombe, he could be the future of the Sixers potentially. So, all studs so far in this 2025 draft. Really, the only weak draft so far of the 2020s has been 2024 with Zachary Ricochet.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of where you see some of the expansion coming in, where you do have some teams who have been bad for a while, like the Hornets finally starting to pick up. And if you look at the talent across the league, there's not too many teams that are without talent. Um, you could point to like the Pelicans, Grizzlies, and Kings probably have the least amount of talent, but I can make the case for Utah being good in the next few years. They have a lot of good draft assets. Definitely the Mavericks with Cooper Flag. You're probably looking at trading Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis just to build a young team around him. And then uh, the Wizards have Trey Young. The Nets are a fun team that hasn't won 17 games. They still have Michael Porter Jr. The Bucks still have Giannis. The Bulls have just been pumping out talent for the rest of the league as kind of a farm team. But like you look at all the other teams, and there's some talent. The Hawks just won 10 straight games. It's the first time they've done that in over 10 years since they had the Joe Johnson era, I believe, with Jeff Teague and Al Horford. The Heat are always good. The Raptors are coming alive. The Magic coming alive. The Cavaliers have talent. So you're really only looking at a handful of teams now where it's about 5 or 6 teams in the NBA that are really lacking star power. But like even the Wizards have Trey Young. The Pacers will get Halliburton back.
Yeah. And the Wizards also did trade for Anthony Davis, too. So they'll be able to pair them together next year. And although I don't think they're going to be great, that's still a fun team to watch on a random Tuesday night in Washington, D.C. So I would even push back on the Wizards a little bit. Pelicans, they're
Yeah, I
the
was
only
saying they
team that I
did
think is,
with Trey Young.
yeah, like they're a fun team. The Kings, they're another team that's kind of in a tough situation. They do have a lot of our favorite players of 2014 on that roster. Like they got the Russell Westbrooks of the world, you got the Malik Monks, Doug McDermott. But otherwise, this team definitely needs some help. And then outside of them, yeah, the Pelicans are kind of screwed. But
And the
everybody else,
Grizzlies.
yeah, Grizzlies. I mean, they have Ja, but that's a breakup waiting to happen. Um, but the
Yeah.
Pelicans, yeah,
For
DeJounte and Zion, not good.
yeah, for me the teams that are really there's only really 4 5 teams that jump out to me. And it's the Kings just because they're older, but you still have Sabonis there. And then it would be the Nets, Bulls, Pelicans, and Grizzlies, who I'd say are the most screwed teams. But every other team in the NBA, I can make a case for being good next season.
Yeah, and we are entering March Madness. These teams are most likely going to have that number one overall pick. So, more often than not, we're probably going to see the face, potentially a new face of the league, by the end of this month.
And so we have the 2020 picks, definitely a lot better than the 2000s, and we have some legit talent coming into the NBA. But like when you look at all these number one picks, does anything look rigged to you here as far as the lottery? Like outside of like for me, like the Wemby pick stands out, especially because they get Victor Wembanyama, Stephon Castle the next year, and then Dylan Harper. But the Hawks still could have taken Stephon Castle. But like the Mavericks getting Cooper Flag, like anything stand out for like it looks like the NBA is trying to rig this.
If we're talking about this generation, obviously the Wemby one was the most suspicious because I think they had the eighth overall pick projected and they somehow win it. Or better yet, how about Cooper Flag? The fact that they traded away Luka Doncic for a bag of chips and they miraculously got it when I believe they were the 10th pick as
I think
far
they're
as
in the
ping pongs
play-in
are
tournament.
concerned. Yeah, they were the play-in tournament and they somehow won the lottery. That's ridiculous. And then I guess if we go like for the other drafts we talked about, the fact that the Sixers got back-to-back number one overall picks for the trust the process, and they missed on both of them. Like that's maybe where the NBA was like, oh, here an opportunity for the Sixers to be good again. They haven't been good since Allen Iverson, and before Allen Iverson, they haven't been good since Moses Malone. Here's their opportunity for a big market in the NBA to be good, and they fucked it up. Other than that, I think those are the two obvious shout outs for me because Timberwolves not so suspicious there. Hawks not really, but Cooper Flag and Victor Wembanyama, the most bona fide stars of that draft. Absolutely.
What missed pick for a team that had the number one overall pick for the drafts we covered do you think is the most consequential for the team not taking that
Uh,
player?
the Sixers taking Markel Fultz over Jason Tatum. That absolutely is the most consequential. You have him. You would have bet him with Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, not only and some of the other players you had on your team at that time. That Sixers team probably could have won an NBA championship had they have taken Jason Tatum over Markelle Fultz, but instead they take Fultz and they fizzle out, and now the Sixers are a joke.
Yeah, I would go probably the Suns taking DeAndre Ayton over SGA. Because like SGA is a Finals
Ooh, that's a good
MVP.
one.
He set a record now, which we'll talk about. And Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were really good together in that Finals run. But SGA, watching him this year, with how automatic his jumper is, like every time he takes a fadeaway jumper, gets to the mid range, hits his spot, you know it's going in. So if he goes out there and wins back to back championships and becomes the first player to win back-to-back championships since 2019, since the Warriors did it with Kevin Durant, I think that'd be a huge accomplishment, and he might win back-to-back MVP on top of it. And he broke the scoring record for Wilt, which is 127 straight 20-point games. So if you had him and Devin Booker together, I think that would have been potentially a title team, especially since SGA bounced around a lot. I mean, he went to the Hornets, then he went to the Clippers. Then the Clippers sent him to the Thunder. I think he had another team in there as well, but that's basically the gist of it. But it's interesting that SGA kind of bounced around a little bit, and then Trae Young was once to be thought as better than him. Luka was thought to be better, but if you give me a choice between Luka and SGA, I'll take SGA, especially with what he gives you on defense, and Luka gives you a net negative on that side of the ball.
I think an interesting thing with that draft is if they take Shea, do they end up making that Kevin Durant trade, which has crippled the Suns since then? Do they make that Bradley Beal move? Probably not, because now you have two great scorers. Maybe instead of trading for Kevin Durant, maybe they instead make that deal for Karl Anthony Towns, or maybe they make that deal for DeMonte Sabonis, somebody like a big man at this point. You're probably looking at a different deal, and you're probably not including SGA in that deal. Mikal Bridges is probably not in there either. So honestly, yeah, that one's probably one that the Suns have nightmares over because DeAndre Ayton did not work out. They hate him in Phoenix. They hate him in LA now. They hated him in Portland as well. So DeAndre Ayton, he's kind of just the ugly step cousin of the NBA at this point.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, with those parameters, probably the biggest bust, while Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz are probably worse than him, is probably the biggest bust since Anthony Bennett. And then the closest thing is going to be Zachary Rasacher, but he's in a bad draft too. The thing with DeAndre Ayton is he's in a generational draft where you have
Yeah.
multiple guys who are very good, and you have two guys drafted after him who are arguably top five NBA players. Personally, I don't think Luka's the top five player as of right now. Maybe a scorer, but as a player, no. But you can still argue he's a top five player. But yeah, it looks like Brick is having a connection issue right here. But we were just going over the drafts between 2014 to 2019, then comparing it to 2020 to 2025. Definitely interesting there. I mean, 2020 to 2025 really only have one miss there. Where when you look at 2014 to 2019, the only person you could argue would still be the number one overall pick would be, it's not really any of them because you still have Karl Anthony Towns draft in 2015. You still could have taken Devin Booker over Karl Anthony Towns. Then you have Ben Simmons would have taken Jaylen Brown instead of him. Markelle Fultz would have taken Jason Tatum instead of him. DeAndre Ayton probably taking SGA, Trae Young, or Luka over him. And I'm sure there's more players. And then the Zion draft in 2019, that's probably the weakest one, but you still have, you know, Ja Morant there. You still have a couple other players you take over Zion just because he's been so in and out of the lineup. I still think I would probably rather have John Morant over Zion Williamson, even though Zion's upside is still really big. And then 2020, Anthony Edwards, not really taking anyone over him. I think you could make a case for Halliburton. For Cade Cunningham, I think he's the best player in his draft. Paulo, you have him versus Chet. I would still take Paulo. Then Wemby is just a generational talent. He might be one of the best players of all time. So that's one of those. Can't really pass up. 2024, not a strong draft. We still have to see, especially in the NBA. It takes 2 to 4 years for players to really come into their own. But in the 2024 draft, when we're looking at the number 1 overall pick for the Atlanta Hawks, I would take Stephon Castle right now. I think Stephon Castle is the best player in that draft. We saw what the Spurs did against the Nuggets, even though they lost without Wemby. When Wembanyama sat out, Stephon Castle had 30, 10, and 10. So he had a triple-double, and he's been playing really well as of late if you're keeping up with the Spurs. And then Cooper Flag, I would probably still take him number 1, but if you want to take Concaneppel over him, I can't really argue against it, especially since Concaneppel is leading the league right now as far as three-pointers made. And then he's turned around the Hornets. He's helped them out, and they are now the 10th seed. They have one of the best net ratings in 2026 as far as the Hornets, him and LaMelo Ball. You have Cody White on that team, so that team's really turning around. So maybe you make it out of the play-in tournament, but definitely some interesting drafts there. So wait for Brick to get back to go over the BAM game. But just looking at the NBA standings right now, we had a huge game tonight. And the Lakers and the Rockets played. And Kevin Durant only had 2 points in the second half, and then the Lakers take firm control, if you can call it that, over the number 3 seed. Looks like he's still experiencing some connectivity issues there. But we have the Lakers winning. It's still a tight race there. It's about 2 games between the Lakers, Rockets, Nuggets, and Timberwolves. Thing though is the Lakers have had a tough go of it as of late. They've struggled with perimeter defense, but they have beaten the Denver Nuggets and the Houston Rockets in back-to-back games. So they have some momentum going to the playoffs. Luka Doncic still averaging over 32 points. However, they get into the playoffs. I still do think they're going to struggle with perimeter defense when it comes down to it. And them going up against the Minnesota Timberwolves again, maybe you win that matchup, but I still think the Timberwolves end up edging them out. But that would be definitely a tough series for the Lakers. They're kind of punting until next season, until they have more cap money to spend. And then the Rockets in the standings, I think they'll continue to fall a little bit. Defensively, I think they're fine. However, you have a huge hole in the middle of the floor without Steven Adams, and then Alperen Şengün is just not a good defender. He's a good scorer in the NBA. He'll probably be a great scorer for a long time, but he just doesn't play defense, and he's not a good enough defender, I think, for the Rockets to go far. So I do think they would lose in a potential matchup against the Nuggets in the first round now. And then as far as the play-in tournament, the Clippers are the first team in NBA history. They made history this week where they're the first team to be 15 games below 500 to make it back to a plus 500 record, which is exactly what the LA Clippers did. And Kawhi has been playing really good basketball as of late, and the Clippers have been coming alive a little bit. So it's interesting to see this team make a push. The Warriors are kind of out of it. I don't think the Portland Trailblazers are experienced enough where they would beat the Suns, who just had a tough loss versus the Celtics, or the Clippers. So I do think we'll see the Clippers finishing in that 7th or 8th seed, and then the Suns finishing there as well. Do either of those teams have a shot at beating the Spurs or Thunder? No. And right now, my early pick to get out of the West would still be the Spurs, even though the Thunder I still think are a better overall team right now. I just think Wemby in a 7-game series is going to be too much to handle. Then we also have the East, and the East is tough because the Knicks have struggled as of late. And they're a good team, and they're a team that has Anunoby, Mikal Bridges. They have Karl Anthony Towns. They have Jalen Brunson and Mike Brown now as their head coach. So you have enough talent to go out there and get it done. It's just going to be, are they going to go out there and get past the conference championship? They got past Boston last year, but I still don't think they have enough to really get to the finals or win one. And I don't think there's a team right now good enough in the East to beat anyone who comes out of the West. I think we're probably on a collision course right now. Welcome back, Brick, who had some connectivity issues. He was telling too much truth about DeAndre Ayton. DeAndre Ayton made a call to his good friend Bibi Netanyahu to get our stream shut down. DeAndre Ayton, Bibi Netanyahu, we all know how tight they are.
Yes, and we are back. We were talking about playoffs. I think the West, it's got to be Thunders and Spurs. Every other team, they're a second-round miss. In the East, I still believe it's Celtics, Pistons, and Knicks as the big three. I do think in the play-in tournaments for the East, I like to see the Hawks and Sixers advance, but I do think the Hornets, they've been red hot. They could make a jump as well. So I would shout out I would say Hornets and Hawks there with how hot they've been. And then for the Western Conference play-in, right now, Suns and Clippers. I like what they've done. Clippers, like you mentioned, they've crawled back from the dead. They were 15 games below 500, and now they are above 500 again. They made history. So I think the Clippers could be a dangerous fight. They can't beat the Spurs or Thunder, so they're going to have to probably get out of the play-in tournament, which I'm not sure if they can do yet. But the fact that they are where they are is an accomplishment in and of itself. And then Warriors and Trailblazers, they're both dead, so it doesn't matter to them right there.
Wow, you really blindly hate the Blazers. You're like, I don't care what young players are on this team. I know I don't like them.
The Trailblazers just are so boring. They're such a boring team. And maybe I don't have any beef with the city of Portland. I've never been, but I just think I like Drew Holiday, Jeremy Grant, we have good memories with. We like Matisse Thybulle, but Scoot Henderson hasn't done too much for me. I don't know if he was the second overall pick. He just hasn't done it for me so far. Outside of that, I'm just not they're just a boring team. And I just don't think when we have all this other talent in the Western Conference, the fact that they're the 10th seed, it'd be more exciting to see the Mavericks, but unfortunately the Mavericks suck.
Yeah, no. Well, Kawhi versus SGA is definitely the most interesting matchup in the first round. To make it Clippers and Thunder, and then the Spurs will just sweep the Warriors, and then I think they would win in 5 or 6 versus the winner of the Lakers or Timberwolves, and then. The Nuggets, I always give them a chance just with Jokic versus the Thunder, but I do think it's going to be the Spurs, and that's my strongest conviction as far as the team getting to the finals here. But I was talking about a little bit of playoffs to stall, but there's one team in the playoffs with Bam.
Greatest scorer of all time, I heard.
The greatest scorer of all time on film right now. I know there's that elusive.
He's the greatest living scorer ever.
Never been the greatest scorer who's ever been filmed. We'll say.
And there's a stat that I wanted to share. So, Bam broke math. His 83-point game was 8.5 standard deviations above his career average, or 1 in 53 quadrillion. And based on his career averages, this is if Patrick Mahomes passing for 915 passing yards in a single game, Justin Verlander throwing 214 pitches in a start, or Wilt Chamberlain grabbing 79 rebounds. Now, a lot of people are complaining about the end of the game because he had I think 60 after the third quarter, farming for the 83. I don't care. Who cares if they were? if you have that many points by the fourth quarter, can we have more people going for the record? Is that bad for the NBA? Was Bam scoring 83 bad for the league? Somebody's going to cry about it, but it's not going to be me. I think it's hilarious because you know what happened was I was watching, I had to get my taxes done, and I go and get my taxes done. Finally, I've been procrastinating for the last 3 months. I get my taxes done. I get out of the taxes, getting my taxes done, get a nice little refund, and I just see Bam Adebayo has 76. I'm like, look again. Bam Adebayo has 76. So I'm like, this is the right Bam. Are we talking about like Bam Adebayo? No. I look at the stat sheet, and he has 43 free throws. He has 76, and then eventually 83. And it's amazing. This is exactly like if you're going to give us a reason to watch the regular season, it's because on a random night, someone like Bam Adebayo could go for a record. I think that's good for the NBA, but I feel like a lot of people disagree with me.
Yeah, a lot of people disagree, and I think it's kind of because I think Kobe fans, because of what happened to him, have become the most sensitive fans in the league as far as the NBA, and they're the most defensive of him. So I think it is because it was a record held by Kobe that this was the one they did it. And then I think it was the obvious free throws where the refs were just automatically, anytime he would just go up, the refs would give him a call. But at the end of the day, what Bam Adebayo said was, "It's not my fault that the Wizards didn't stop me from scoring 30 in a quarter." I mean, he scored 30 in the first quarter. I mean, he actually underperformed because that puts him on pace for 120 points, if I did the math right. Not
Yeah.
83.
Yeah, he could have been the greatest scorer ever statistically in the NBA, which I still think he is because we all know the Wilt thing is very fraudulent, but 83 points is nothing to sniff at. And people act like Bam Adebayo is a bum, which is my biggest beef. Like, this is a guy that's made it to 2 finals. Maybe he wasn't the star of that particular finals, but he's a consistent 20-point scorer, consistent double-double machine, good defender, all-star. Like, it's not like this was like a random bum out of nowhere who just dropped 83. Like Bam Adebayo was still a really good player. 2017 draft, we talked about him, but I don't know. I think this is good for the NBA, and I hope more players go for the record. We need to see another. If Bam Adebayo can get 83 against the Wizards, then why not the Wizards when they take on the Spurs? They just keep feeding it to Wemby. He can get if Wilt can get 100. How many points can Victor Wembanyama get? I think he can get at least 115.
Yeah, I think people are mad because they're like, oh, it's going to be a 3-point shooter. Someone's going to hit like 15 threes in a night, right? Where you're going to have like Steph Curry or James Harden get out of their mind hot and hit 15 threes. And then with Bam, he goes 7 for 22 from three. So, like, with all things considered, he takes 43 shots. So, a little over half of his shots were 3-point shots. And then his true shooting percentage was 67% in this game. So, it's like he didn't even hit that many threes. Like, only 21 points. He had 21 points from threes. You add that on top of his free throws, and that is 57 points.
Which is still a good game. But yeah, I see the complaints, but I just think it's a little ridiculous. If it wasn't Bam, like imagine if it was someone like SGA who dropped 83, would it be a different conversation? Probably, because he's a perennial scorer, but it's the Kobe fans that are just getting a little ridiculous with it.
Yeah,
But
so like
most points of
O'Shea
all time.
Jackson was talking about it. Ice Cube's son, O'Shea Jackson Jr. He was like, "Yeah, I'm not believing anything in the NBA." He's like, "I've seen pro wrestling. That's exactly what it was." But I think it's fun, just on a random night versus the Wizards. Bam was like, "You know what? I'm gonna go out there and get 83." And I didn't see anyone complain when Devin Booker scored over 70 versus the Celtics on a random night, too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's ridiculous, but I hope we see more things like this in the future. I hope more people go for the record because if Bam has like you can't keep Bam at 83 and have him have the record. Everybody knows the Wilt record's a joke. So I think we should have more people just do exactly what Bam did. If they're going to call the whistle, let's get somebody to 100 again. Let's get someone to actually get 100 points.
Yeah, I think like if you want to like complain about anything, just complain about the refs like calling it every time he went up. But like people shouldn't blame Bam for wanting to break the record. Like that is what you should do. If like you never know when you're going to get this kind of opportunity again to have this big of a game, and it also helps you pump the team up for the playoffs, give you some mojo. You were just coming off a big win versus the Hornets, who are really hot. They were currently rated as the best team in 2026 as far as net rating until you kind of knocked them back down to earth. Then they've been on a little bit of a skid since you played them. But like Bam is like a it's like one of those things where sometimes a player does something like this. Like, remember when Nick Foles had 7 passing touchdowns? Peyton Manning just set the record for most passing touchdowns. Then, like, it was a year or two later, Nick Foles has 7 passing touchdowns versus the Raiders.
Yeah, so it happens. I can say this probably puts Bam as a Hall of Famer at this point. I mean, now he's a two-time he's a two-time. He's made it to the finals 2 times. He's a several-time All-Star. He has been a consistent All NBA player. So like at this point with Bam, like he's like 29. He's probably a Hall of Famer after this, most likely. Because how can you have the most points in a single game and not be the all-time? How can you not be a Hall of Famer? And I think Bam, he was like a borderline Hall of Famer before. I know it's early in his career, but now it's probably in the Hall of Fame, at least on the trajectory he's on.
Do you think Tatum would have subbed himself out at 81 points?
Yes, absolutely. And he would have wrote a letter to Kobe.
He would have texted his phone. I still text him sometimes for advice.
Yeah. But we've covered a lot with the NFL East and Wests. We've talked about the expansion. We've talked about the NBA. All things considered. Next week, we'll be around for Tuesday night, and we'll be back for what will be 9 p.m. Eastern. So make sure to check in and follow us on all our socials as well at the Brickyard.
Yeah, and until then, most importantly, stay brick.